The yacht exploded behind them as Mason dragged the unconscious billionaire through black water, his lungs screaming for air while debris rained down like burning stars. Blood mixed with seawater on Scarlet Vale's forehead as another wave slammed them deeper into the storm. 7 miles away, in a house Mason would never see again, his 7-year-old daughter Lily opened the door to men who smiled wrong. One leaned down and asked where Daddy kept his work files. Lily ran. Mason didn't know. He was too busy drowning, clinging to a woman worth $3 billion who couldn't save either of them now. The ocean didn't care about money. It only cared about taking. If you want to see how a single father and a billionaire survive when the world tries to kill them both, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The smell hit Mason Reed before he even stepped onto the dock. Salt, diesel, and money. Lots of money. The kind that came with yachts big enough to have their own zip codes. He shifted his toolbox to his other hand and squinted against the morning sun bouncing off the water. The yacht waiting at the end of the pier looked like something out of a magazine spread, all gleaming white hull and tinted windows. 3 stories tall. Easy. Maybe 4 if you counted whatever the hell that was on top. You Mason Reed? The guy asking wore a polo shirt with an embroidered logo Mason didn't recognize. Sunglasses hid his eyes, but his mouth was doing that thing rich people's mouths always did, smiling without meaning it. That's me. ID? Mason pulled out his wallet, fishing past old receipts and Lily's school photos until he found his driver's license. The polo shirt guy barely glanced at it before nodding toward the yacht. Hydraulic steering's been sticking. Owner wants it fixed before we leave port. When's that? 2 hours. Mason bit back a comment about short notice and ridiculous deadlines. He needed this job. The electricity bill was 3 weeks overdue, and Lily's school had started sending home notes about unpaid lunch fees that made his chest tight every time he thought about them. I'll need to see the system first, obviously. Polo shirt guy turned and started walking. Mason followed. The yacht was called the Azure Dream, which seemed like the kind of name people gave boats when they had too much money and not enough imagination. Mason had seen it docked here twice before, always surrounded by security guys in matching shirts and women in dresses that probably cost more than his truck. He'd never actually been on board until today. The interior made his teeth hurt. Everything was cream-colored leather and dark wood that looked like it had been imported from some forest where trees grew gold leaves. The air conditioning was cranked so high, Mason could see his breath when he exhaled. Engine room's down 2 levels, polo shirt guy said without looking back. Don't touch anything except the steering system. Wasn't planning on it. They passed through what looked like a living room, or maybe a lounge. Mason wasn't sure what rich people called it, where a woman with silver hair was setting up some kind of presentation screen. She glanced up as they walked by, her expression flat and unreadable. Down 1 level, then another. The hum of engines grew louder with each step, that low thrumming sound that meant serious horsepower. Mason's toolbox rattled against his leg as they descended a narrow stairwell that finally opened into the engine room. Now this was more like it. Mason set down his toolbox and got to work. The hydraulic steering system was exactly as advertised. Sticky as hell and probably overdue for a full replacement. But replacement parts cost money, and rich people, Mason had learned, only spent money when something actually broke. Preventive maintenance was for suckers. He was elbow deep in the hydraulic lines when voices drifted down from somewhere above. A man and a woman, arguing in those tight whispered tones that meant they were trying not to be heard. Absolutely insane if you think I'm signing anything before we get back to port. The timeline doesn't change just because you're uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? Try suspicious as hell. Marcus. Their voices faded as they moved away. Mason focused on the hydraulic pump, testing the pressure release valve. Sticky, but not seized. He could work with that. Time slipped by the way it always did when he was fixing something. The world narrowed down to his hands, and the problem in front of him, everything else fading into background noise. It was the only time his brain ever really shut up about bills and deadlines and the fact that Lily needed new shoes again already. How did kids grow so damn fast? How's it looking? Mason jerked, nearly dropping his wrench. He turned to find a woman standing in the doorway of the engine room, arms crossed, watching him with eyes that could have cut glass. Scarlet Vale. He recognized her immediately, even though the photos never quite captured how sharp she looked in person. 30 years old and worth more money than some small countries. Dark hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Wearing black pants and a white shirt that probably cost more than Mason's monthly rent. Her expression suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. Should be done in about 20 minutes, Mason said, wiping his hands on his jeans. Pressure valve needed adjustment. Oh. Is it going to fail mid-voyage? Not if I do my job right. That's not an answer. Mason straightened up, meeting her eyes. No, it won't fail. Won't. The whole system could use an overhaul eventually, but it'll hold for whatever you've got planned today. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or approval. Hard to tell. You're the mechanic from town. The one with the daughter. Mason's jaw tightened. Yeah. I saw you at the school fundraiser last month. You were selling raffle tickets. That's right. He turned back to the hydraulic lines, hoping she'd take the hint and leave. The last thing he needed was small talk with a billionaire who probably thought slumming it meant shopping at Target. Your wife passed away. Cancer. Mason's hand stopped moving. 3 years ago. I'm sorry. The words sounded genuine, which somehow made them worse. He didn't want her pity. Didn't want anyone's pity. He just wanted to finish this job, collect his money, and get back to his actual life. Thanks, he said without turning around. I should finish up here if you want to leave on schedule. The hydraulic system. If it fails, what happens? Steering goes out. You'd be dead in the water until someone fixed it. How long would that take? Depends on the problem and whether you've got parts on board. Could be 20 minutes. Could be never. Scarlett was quiet for a long moment, then, make sure it doesn't fail. She left without waiting for a response. Mason finished the job in 15 minutes, tested the steering 3 times to make sure it responded clean, then hauled his toolbox back up to the main deck. Polo shirt guy inspected his work with all the warmth of a health inspector finding rats in a restaurant kitchen, but eventually nodded. You're clear. Payment will be wired by end of business day. Appreciate it. Mason was halfway down the gangplank when someone shouted behind him, Wait, Reed, hold up. He turned to find a different guy jogging toward him, this one in an actual suit despite the heat. He was maybe 40, with the kind of tan that came from yachts instead of working outdoors, and hair that had definitely seen a professional stylist recently. Marcus Chen, the man said, slightly out of breath. I'm Ms. Vale's business partner. Listen, we've got a situation. My job's done, steering's fixed. Not that situation. Marcus glanced back at the yacht, then lowered his voice. Our regular engineer called in sick this morning, food poisoning. We need someone who knows marine systems in case anything goes wrong during the trip. You've got a whole crew who are trained for hospitality, not repairs. This is a business retreat, Reed. 6 hours out, 6 hours back, with some very important people on board. Vale's meeting with potential investors for a major acquisition. If something breaks down in the middle of the ocean, hire another marine engineer. On 2 hours' notice? Marcus pulled out his wallet, extracting a black credit card like he was unsheathing a weapon. I'll pay triple your daily rate. All you have to do is stay on board in case we need you. Probably won't. But if we do... Mason thought about the electricity bill, Lily's school fees, the slow leak in his bathroom ceiling that was definitely getting worse. 4 times my rate, he said, plus hazard pay if I actually have to fix something. Marcus didn't even blink. Done. We leave in 90 minutes. Don't be late. Fuck. Mason called Mrs. Chen from his truck, phone pressed between his ear and shoulder while he drove. I know it's last minute, yeah, he said before his neighbor could protest. Emergency job came up. Good money. I should be back by tonight, maybe midnight at the latest. Mrs. Chen had been watching Lily on and off since Mason's wife died. She was 73, deaf in one ear, and had opinions about everything from Mason's cooking to his dating life, which was to say, the complete lack thereof. But she loved Lily, and Lily loved her. And that was what mattered. Midnight? Mrs. Chen's voice crackled through the speaker. Mason, that child needs routine. I know, but this job pays enough to cover 3 months of her school lunches, Mrs. Chen. I can't turn it down. A long sigh on the other end. Fine, but you owe me one of those pot roasts. Other deal. He made it home with 40 minutes to spare. Lily was in the backyard, crouched beside the rusted swing set Mason kept meaning to fix, examining something in the grass with the intense focus she usually reserved for her homework. Bug hunting? He called out. She looked up, grinning. Dirt smudged her cheek and her ponytail had come half undone, brown hair falling across her eyes. 7 years old and already too smart for her own good, with her mother's smile and Mason's stubborn streak. It's a beetle, she announced, the iridescent kind. Iridescent, that's a big word. Miss Martinez taught us. It means shiny with lots of colors. Mason crouched down beside her. The beetle was indeed shiny, its shell catching the light in shifting patterns of green and blue. Lily had it cupped gently between her palms, peering at it through the gaps in her fingers. Pretty cool, Mason agreed. Hey, kiddo, I've got to tell you something. Her face fell immediately. She always knew when he was about to deliver bad news. You're working late. Just tonight. Mrs. Chen's going to make you dinner and put you to bed. I'll be back before you wake up tomorrow. Promise. You said we were going to watch that movie tonight. I know. I'm sorry. We'll watch it tomorrow instead, okay? Double feature. Popcorn and everything. Lily released the beetle and watched it scuttle away into the grass. Is it the money thing again? Mason's chest tightened. What money thing? The one that makes you look sad when you check the mail. Christ. 7 years old. It's not... He stopped, started over. Yeah, it's the money thing, but this job's going to help with that. So when I get back, we won't have to worry for a while. Okay? Lily stood up, brushing dirt off her knees. Can we get ice cream tomorrow too? After the movies? Absolutely. She hugged him then, fierce and quick, before running back inside to wash her hands. Mason stayed crouched in the grass for another moment, watching the beetle disappear under the fence. He'd be back by tomorrow morning. Easy job. Nothing to worry about. The Azure Dream left port at exactly noon, gliding away from the dock with the kind of smooth power that only serious money could buy. Mason stood near the stern, watching the coastline shrink behind them, his toolbox secured in a storage locker below deck. There were maybe 20 people on board total. Most of them were clustered in the main lounge, the business retreat Marcus had mentioned. Mason caught glimpses of expensive suits and laptop screens through the windows. Scarlet Vale stood at the head of the room, presenting something on a large monitor, her voice too muted by distance and glass for Mason to make out words. He wasn't supposed to be watching anyway. His job was to stay out of sight unless something broke. The ocean stretched out in every direction, dark blue going gray at the edges where it met the sky. The weather forecast had called for clear skies all day, but Mason could see a line of clouds building on the horizon to the west. Probably nothing. Storms this time of year usually tracked north, away from the shipping lanes. Enjoying the view? Mason turned to find Marcus Chen standing behind him, holding 2 bottles of beer. He offered one to Mason. I'm on the clock, Mason said. So am I. Doesn't mean we can't be civilized about it. Marcus took a long drink from his own bottle, then gestured at the lounge windows. She's about to close the biggest deal of her career. 3 years of negotiations, due diligence, regulatory approval, all of it coming down to today. Good for her. You don't like rich people much, do you? Mason accepted the beer after all. I don't think about rich people much. Bullshit. Everyone thinks about rich people. We're fascinating. Marcus grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. You think we're all spoiled assholes who've never worked a day in our lives? I think some people get lucky and some people don't, that's all. Luck. Marcus laughed, sharp and bitter. Yeah, luck. He walked away before Mason could figure out how to respond to that. The afternoon crawled by. Mason did a full inspection of the engine room even though nothing needed inspecting, just to kill time. Everything looked good. The hydraulic steering responded perfectly. The engines hummed steady and strong. Whatever else you could say about the Azure Dream, she was well maintained. He was checking the backup generator when the first real wave hit. The yacht lurched hard to starboard, throwing Mason against the wall. His toolbox slid across the floor and crashed into a support beam. Above him, he heard shouting, confusion first, then alarm. Mason grabbed a handhold and pulled himself upright. The yacht was rocking now, long rolling swells that felt wrong for the weather forecast he'd checked that morning. He made his way to the stairs and climbed up to the main deck. The sky had gone dark. Not sunset dark, storm dark. Those clouds he'd seen on the horizon had moved fast, faster than seemed possible, and now they filled the entire western sky like a bruise. The wind had picked up, too, whipping spray across the deck hard enough to sting. Need to turn back now. Captain says we're too far out. We have to ride it through. This wasn't in the fucking forecast. Polo shirt guy was herding people away from the railing toward the interior cabins. His sunglasses were gone and his carefully styled hair whipped around his face. He spotted Mason and shouted something that got lost in the wind. Mason fought his way across the deck to where the man stood. "What?" Mason yelled. "Captain wants you in the bridge. Now!" The bridge was chaos. Captain Garcia, a weathered woman in her 50s who looked like she'd been sailing since before Mason was born, stood at the helm, jaw tight, eyes locked on the instruments in front of her. "Reed?" she barked without looking at him. "Tell me the truth. That steering system you fixed this morning, how confident are you?" "Very. Why?" "Because we're about to ask it to do things steering systems aren't designed to do." She pointed at one of the monitors. Storm cell came out of nowhere, moving northeast at 40 knots. "We can't outrun it and we can't avoid it, so we're going through." Mason looked at the radar display. The storm cell was massive, a churning spiral of red and orange that covered what looked like 50 miles of ocean. "How bad?" he asked. "Bad enough that I'm telling you to pray your repair work holds." The first real wave nearly flipped them. Mason was thrown across the bridge, slamming into a console hard enough to see stars. Somewhere below, glass shattered. People were screaming. The yacht heeled over so far that for a terrible moment, Mason thought they were going to capsize. But then Garcia fought the wheel, and they came back upright, shuddering. "Get below!" Garcia shouted. "Make sure the engines don't flood." Mason didn't argue. He half ran, half fell down the stairs toward the engine room, bouncing off walls as the yacht pitched and rolled. Water was already sloshing across the lower deck. Seawater, coming in from somewhere. Not good. The engine room was a nightmare. Water ankle-deep and rising, alarm screaming, and one of the backup pumps making a grinding sound that meant it was about to seize. Mason waded in, ignoring the cold shock of the water, and got to work. He lost track of time. Lost track of everything except the immediate problem in front of him. Keep the pumps running, keep the engines from flooding, keep the yacht from sinking. His hands moved on autopilot, tightening bolts, clearing debris from intake valves, rerouting power when circuits sparked and died. Another massive wave hit. The yacht went sideways, and this time Mason heard the grinding scream of metal under stress. Something had torn loose, something structural. He was fighting his way back toward the stairs when the explosion hit. The blast picked him up and threw him like a rag doll. He had a split-second glimpse of orange fire blooming in the engine room before the water rushed in, black and freezing, swallowing everything. Mason's head broke the surface, and he gasped for air, disoriented, ears ringing, debris everywhere. The yacht, what was left of it, was listing badly, stern already half submerged. People in the water, some swimming, some just floating. The storm still raged around them, waves like moving mountains. He saw her through the smoke and spray, scarlet veil, clinging to a piece of wreckage maybe 20 feet away, blood running down her face from a gash along her hairline. Her eyes were wide with shock, mouth open in a scream Mason couldn't hear over the roar of wind and water. A wave rolled over her. She disappeared. Mason didn't think. He dove. The water was chaos, debris spinning past, bodies moving in the current, everything dark and cold. His lungs burned, his vision narrowed to a tunnel. He kicked deeper, searching, and there, a flash of white shirt, pale hand reaching up. He grabbed Scarlett's wrist and hauled her toward the surface. They broke through together, both gasping. Scarlett coughed up seawater, choking, barely conscious. Another wave crashed over them, and Mason wrapped his arm around her chest, holding her head above water while he searched for something, anything, they could hold on to. There. A section of hull, maybe 10 feet across, floating 30 yards away. Mason kicked toward it, dragging Scarlett with him, fighting the current that wanted to pull them under. His hand closed on the edge of the debris. He hauled Scarlett up first, then pulled himself after her. They collapsed on the makeshift raft, gasping like dying fish. Mason looked back at where the Azure Dream had been. The stern was already gone, swallowed by the ocean. The bow pointed skyward at an impossible angle, and as he watched, it too began to sink, slowly at first, then faster, until the whole thing disappeared beneath the waves with a sound like the world ending. Other pieces of wreckage floated nearby. A few people clung to debris, but most had already vanished beneath the surface. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Scarlett stirred beside him, groaning. Blood still leaked from the cut on her forehead. Her eyes opened, unfocused, and found Mason's face. "What?" she started. Another wave crashed over them, and they both held on for their lives while the ocean tried to tear them apart. When it passed, Mason checked the debris around them. No other survivors visible. No rescue boats on the horizon. Just water and storm and the growing darkness as the sun disappeared behind the clouds. "We need to stay with the debris field," Mason said, more to himself than to Scarlett. "They'll send rescue teams to the last known coordinates. If we drift too far, my phone," Scarlett mumbled. She was patting her pockets weakly, leaving smears of blood on her wet clothes. "I need to call, Your phone's gone." No, I have to. The deal. Where's Marcus?" Mason didn't answer. He'd seen Marcus go under in the first seconds after the explosion. The man hadn't come back up. Scarlett seemed to realize what his silence meant. She made a sound like all the air had been punched out of her lungs. "We need to stay awake," Mason said. "Both of us. The water's cold. If we fall asleep, I know what happens if we fall asleep." They lashed themselves to the debris with strips torn from Mason's shirt, crude but effective. The storm raged around them all through the night. Waves that should have killed them somehow didn't. The debris held together. They held on. Somewhere around dawn, the storm finally started to break. The waves grew smaller. The wind died down to something merely dangerous instead of immediately lethal. Mason scanned the horizon in every direction. No land, no ships, no rescue helicopters, just ocean. Scarlett was shivering violently now, her lips tinged blue. The cut on her forehead had stopped bleeding but looked infected. She kept drifting in and out of consciousness. "Hey," Mason said, shaking her shoulder. "Stay with me. What's your daughter's name? Don't have—" Scarlett's eyes fluttered. "Don't have kids. Then tell me about your company. The deal you were closing. Talk to me." "Vision Tech Acquisition." Her words slurred together. 800 million. Supposed to announce Monday. Supposed to... Marcus was... Her eyes closed. "Scarlett! Scarlett!" She didn't respond. Mason checked her pulse. Still there, but thready and weak. He pulled her closer, trying to share body heat, knowing it probably wasn't enough. The sun rose higher. The ocean turned from black to gray to blue. Beautiful and deadly and endless. Around midday, Mason saw it. At first he thought it was a hallucination, exhaustion and dehydration playing tricks. But no, there, on the horizon, land, not much, just a dark smudge that could have been an island or maybe just a large rock formation. But it was something. Mason checked their makeshift raft, still holding together, barely. He looked at Scarlett, unconscious and possibly dying. Then he looked at the distant island. They'd never make it. The current was pulling them parallel to the land, not toward it. Even if he tried to swim, dragging the debris and Scarlett with him, a wave lifted them higher than the others. For just a moment, Mason felt the current shift. He made a decision. Using his belt and the remaining strips of his shirt, he secured Scarlett more tightly to the debris. Then he slipped into the water and started kicking, using the raft like a kickboard, pushing them toward the island centimeter by centimeter. His muscles screamed, his vision blurred. He swallowed seawater and choked it back up. The island seemed to get farther away instead of closer. He kept kicking. Hours passed, maybe days. Time lost all meaning. When his feet finally touched sand, Mason genuinely thought he'd died, and this was whatever came after. But then he felt real ground under him, solid and unmoving, and he dragged Scarlett and their raft up onto a narrow beach. Palm trees swayed overhead. Rocks jutted out of the jungle beyond the beach. The island was small. He could probably walk its perimeter in an hour, but it was land. They'd made it. Mason collapsed beside Scarlett on the sand, too exhausted to move, too exhausted to even feel relief. He stared up at the sky, watching clouds drift past, and thought about Lily. Mrs. Chen would have gotten worried by now, would have called the Coast Guard maybe. They'd be searching for the yacht, would find the debris field eventually. But would they find this island? Beside him, Scarlett coughed weakly. Her eyes opened, just barely, and found his face. "Where?" she managed. "Safe," Mason said, even though he had no idea if that was true. "We're safe." Her eyes closed again. Mason lay there on the sand as the sun climbed higher, baking them both, and tried to figure out what the hell they were supposed to do next. The sun was directly overhead when Mason finally forced himself to move. Every muscle in his body felt like it had been beaten with a hammer. His skin was raw from salt water and sun, his throat so dry he could barely swallow. But lying on the beach wasn't going to fix any of that. Scarlett was still unconscious beside him, her breathing shallow and ragged. The cut on her forehead had swollen, the edges angry and red. Mason touched her shoulder gently. "Scarlett, can you hear me?" No response. He checked her pulse again. Still there, but weaker than before. She needed water, medicine, a real doctor. All the things this island definitely didn't have. Mason stood up slowly, his vision swimming, and looked around. The beach was maybe 30 yards long, bordered on both sides by rocks that jutted out into the water like broken teeth. Behind them, dense jungle climbed up toward what looked like a rocky hillside. No buildings, no boats, no signs that anyone had ever been here before. He walked to the tree line, his legs unsteady, and pushed through the undergrowth. Vines caught at his clothes. Insects buzzed around his head. The air was thick and hot, pressing down on him like a wet blanket. 10 feet in, he found a small pool of water collected in a depression between two rocks. He knelt down, sniffed it. Smelled like rain, not seawater. He cupped his hands and drank, the liquid so sweet on his ruined throat that he almost cried. When he'd drunk his fill, he made his way back to the beach. Scarlett hadn't moved. Mason scooped water into his hands and dripped it onto her lips. Most of it ran down her chin, but some made it into her mouth. She swallowed reflexively. "That's it," Mason muttered. "Come on." He spent the next hour making trips back and forth between the pool and the beach, bringing water to Scarlett one painful handful at a time. On the fourth trip, he found her awake, sitting up slowly, one hand pressed to her forehead. "Don't touch it," Mason said, kneeling beside her. "It's infected." "Where are we?" "Island. Don't know which one. Middle of nowhere, probably." Well, Scarlett looked around, her expression blank, like her brain was still trying to process what her eyes were showing her. Then something shifted in her face and she lurched to her feet, stumbling toward the water. "What are you—" "The yacht," she said, her voice cracking. "We need to find the yacht. The rescue teams will go there first. If we can get back to the coordinates, the yacht's gone. Sunk. There's nothing left. You don't know that. I watched it go down." Scarlett spun to face him, and for the first time Mason saw real fear in her eyes. Not the controlled, manageable fear of a business deal going wrong. Raw terror. "My company," she said. "The acquisition. I was supposed to sign Monday. If I don't show up, if they think I'm dead—" "They probably do think you're dead. Then I need to tell them I'm not. I need to—" She patted her pockets again, the same desperate gesture from yesterday. "My phone! Where's my phone? Bottom of the ocean." No, there has to be. Emergency beacon, radio, something." She started walking down the beach, scanning the sand like she might find a working satellite phone just lying there waiting for her. Mason watched her for a moment, then followed. "Scarlett, don't. Just don't talk to me right now." She made it maybe 20 yards before her legs gave out. Mason caught her before she hit the sand, lowering her down carefully. She was shaking again, her skin clammy despite the heat. "You're in shock," Mason said, "and dehydrated. You need to rest." "I can't rest. I have to." "You have to not die. That's what you have to do." He stood up, looking back toward the jungle. "There's fresh water inland. I'm going to see what else I can find. Stay here. You're not in charge of me." "Yeah, well, right now I'm the only one of us who can stand up without passing out. So guess what? I'm in charge." He left before she could argue. The jungle was worse than it had looked from the beach. Thick undergrowth that grabbed at his ankles, vines hanging low enough to catch his neck, and thorns that tore through his already ruined clothes. Mason pushed through it anyway, moving slowly, scanning for anything useful. He found the coconut palms first, dozens of them, clustered in a clearing where sunlight broke through the canopy. Green coconuts littered the ground. Mason picked one up, testing its weight. Heavy, full of liquid, he gathered as many as he could carry and hauled them back to the beach. Scarlett was exactly where he'd left her, staring out at the ocean like she could will a rescue boat into existence. "Here," Mason said, dropping the coconuts beside her. "Food and water. I don't know how to open a coconut." "Then watch and learn." He found a sharp rock near the waterline and used it to hammer at one of the coconuts until the husk split. The inner shell was harder, but eventually he cracked it open. Spilling clear liquid onto the sand, he handed it to Scarlett. "Drink." She took it, drank, and made a face. "It tastes weird. It tastes like not dying of thirst. Drink it." She did, draining the coconut in long gulps. Some color came back to her face. She set the empty shell down and looked at Mason properly for the first time since they'd washed up. "You saved my life," she said, "on the yacht, during the explosion. I remember you pulled me out of the water." "Yeah. Why?" Mason stared at her. "What kind of question is that?" "A valid one. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. You could have saved yourself and left me to drown." "That's not how decent people work. In my experience, most people aren't decent when their own lives are at stake." Mason opened another coconut, this time keeping it for himself. The liquid was sweet and slightly metallic, but it cut through the dryness in his throat. He drank it all before answering. "I've got a daughter back home," he said. 7 years old. If I'd left you to die, I don't think I could have looked at her again. So yeah, I pulled you out. Don't make it into some big philosophical thing." Scarlett was quiet for a moment. Then, "What's her name?" "Lily." "Is someone taking care of her while you're—" "My neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She's probably losing her mind right now." Mason closed his eyes, trying not to think about Lily waking up to find him gone. Mrs. Chen calling the Coast Guard. The news reports. They'll have search teams out by now, looking for survivors. How long do search teams usually look? 72 hours usually, sometimes longer if conditions are good. And then they stop. Scarlett picked up a handful of sand and let it run through her fingers. Her hands were shaking again. "This isn't real. This can't be real. Yesterday, I was closing the biggest deal of my career. Today, I'm stranded on some island in the middle of nowhere with a—" She stopped. "With a what?" Mason asked. "A boat mechanic? A poor person?" "I wasn't going to say that." "Yeah, you were." She stood up abruptly, wobbling a little, and walked to the water's edge. Mason let her go. He was too tired to argue, and besides, she wasn't wrong. That's exactly what he was. A boat mechanic. A single dad barely scraping by. Not someone who belonged anywhere near a billionaire's world. The afternoon dragged by in uncomfortable silence. Mason explored more of the island while Scarlett sat on the beach, occasionally standing to scan the horizon for rescue boats that never came. He found more coconut palms, some banana trees with fruit still too green to eat, and what might have been wild taro growing near a stream. He also found the remains of an old structure deep in the jungle. Just a few moss-covered stones arranged in a pattern that suggested walls. Someone had been here before, maybe decades ago, maybe longer. They were gone now. When he returned to the beach, the sun was starting to set. Scarlett had moved into the shade of a palm tree, her arms wrapped around her knees, staring at nothing. "We should build a fire," Mason said. "It'll get cold tonight." "I don't know how to build a fire." "Then you're about to learn." He gathered driftwood while Scarlett watched, too exhausted or too shell-shocked to help. Dry wood was scarce. Everything was damp from the ocean, but he found enough to work with. The hard part was getting it to catch. Mason had learned fire starting from his father, back when the old man still took him camping before the drinking got bad. Bow drill method. You needed a straight stick, a curved piece of wood, some cordage, and a lot of patience. He used vines for cordage, a branch from the jungle for the bow, a piece of driftwood for the base. It took 20 minutes of sawing back and forth before he got a coal, and another 10 before the coal caught on the tinder bundle he'd made from dried grass. When the first flame flickered to life, Scarlett actually gasped. "You made fire," she said, like he'd performed actual magic. "Yeah, well, Boy Scouts." You were a Boy Scout? For about 6 months before my dad stopped paying the fees. Mason fed the fire carefully, adding larger pieces of wood as it grew. But I learned the important stuff. They sat on opposite sides of the fire as darkness fell. The flames threw dancing shadows across Scarlett's face, highlighting the ugly bruise that had formed around the cut on her forehead. She kept touching it, then wincing. That needs to be cleaned, Mason said. Properly. Not just with seawater. With what? We don't have any medical supplies. The stream I found inland, fresh water, it's better than nothing. Boom. I'm fine. You're not fine. That cut's infected. If it gets worse, I said I'm fine. Mason held up his hands. Okay. Your funeral. Scarlett glared at him across the fire, and for a moment Mason thought she might actually get up and leave, but then her shoulders slumped and she looked away. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I don't know how to do this. Do what? This, surviving, being helpless. I've spent my entire adult life making sure I was never helpless again. And now? She gestured at the island around them, the empty ocean. Now I don't even know what day it is. Saturday, Mason said. Probably, unless we lost a day. Hard to tell. The acquisition was supposed to close Monday. 3 years of work. 3 years of fighting with investors and lawyers and my own board. And it's all gone because of some freak storm that wasn't even supposed to happen. Mason poked at the fire with a stick. You think the storm wasn't natural? Scarlett looked at him sharply. What? You said supposed to happen. Like someone planned it. No, that's not what I meant. But she looked away when she said it, her jaw tight. Scarlett? It's nothing, just paranoia. The acquisition made some people very unhappy, competitors who'd been trying to buy Vision Tech for years. But sabotaging a yacht? That's insane. That's murder. Mason finished. That's murder. It was a storm, freak weather. These things happen. Yeah, they do. But Mason remembered the explosion, the way it had torn through the engine room so fast, so complete. He'd done enough marine repair to know what a normal engine failure looked like. That hadn't been normal. Scarlett stood up abruptly. I need to sleep. Is there somewhere we can... Just the beach. I'll try to build something better tomorrow. Some kind of shelter. You know how to do that too? Nope. But I'll figure it out. She almost smiled. Almost. Then she walked to the far end of the beach and lay down in the sand, curling up on her side with her back to the fire. Mason stayed up, feeding the flames, watching the ocean. Somewhere out there, rescue teams were searching. Helicopters with spotlights, ships with radar. They'd find the debris field from the yacht. They'd search the area. But would they search this far out? This island was probably miles from where the yacht went down. The current had carried them while they were unconscious. They could be anywhere. He thought about Lily. Mrs. Chen would have called the authorities by now. They'd tell her about the yacht, about the storm, about survivors pulled from the water. Would Lily understand what that meant? That he might not be coming home? Mason added another log to the fire and tried not to think about it. He woke to Scarlett screaming. Mason was on his feet before his brain fully processed what was happening, stumbling across the sand toward where she thrashed in the dark. Nightmare. She was having a nightmare. Hey, he said, crouching beside her. Hey, wake up. You're okay. Scarlett's eyes snapped open, wild and unfocused. She swung at him, her fist connecting with his jaw hard enough to snap his head back. Jesus, don't touch me, she gasped, scrambling backward. Don't! It's me. It's Mason. You were having a nightmare. Recognition slowly filtered into her expression. She stopped moving, her chest heaving, one hand pressed to her mouth. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry. I thought... It's fine. You okay? No, I'm not okay. I'm the opposite of okay. She pulled her knees to her chest, rocking slightly. I keep seeing the explosion. The water. Marcus going under. I can't... Every time I close my eyes... Mason sat down in the sand beside her, keeping enough distance that she wouldn't feel trapped. Yeah, that's normal. After something like this... You sound like you've done this before. My wife. After the diagnosis. She had nightmares every night for months, dreaming about dying, about leaving Lily, about me moving on and forgetting her. He picked up a shell, turning it over in his hands. I used to sit with her until she fell back asleep. Didn't fix anything, but it helped. Did you? Move on? No. Scarlett was quiet for a long moment. Then, what was her name? Caroline. How did she die? Pancreatic cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it. She lasted 8 months after diagnosis. Long enough to see Lily's 4th birthday. That's what she wanted, to make it to Lily's birthday. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too, so they sat in silence, watching the dying embers of the fire. The ocean was calm now, almost peaceful, like it hadn't tried to kill them both less than 24 hours ago. I don't know how to do this, Scarlett said finally. I don't know how to be the person who needs saving. I'm supposed to be the one in control, the one with the answers. Nobody's got answers right now. We're just trying not to die. That's not good enough. It's going to have to be, shit. Scarlett stood up, walked to the water's edge, and stood there with the waves lapping at her feet. Mason watched her for a moment, then got up and started rebuilding the fire. The wood was mostly ash now, but there were still a few coals buried underneath. He coaxed them back to life, adding dry grass and small sticks until flames appeared again. When Scarlett came back, she sat closer to him this time. Not touching, but close enough that he could feel the heat coming off her skin. Tell me about Lily, she said. What's she like? Mason smiled despite himself. Smart. Too smart. She's reading at a 5th grade level already. Loves bugs and space and asking questions I don't know how to answer. Last week she asked me why the universe is expanding and where it's expanding into. 7 years old. What did you tell her? That I'd look it up. Then I spent 2 hours on YouTube watching physics videos I barely understood so I could give her an answer that wasn't complete garbage. Did it work? She asked 3 more questions I couldn't answer, so no. Scarlett laughed, soft and surprised. It was the first time Mason had heard her laugh. It changed her whole face, made her look younger. She sounds amazing, Scarlett said. She is. She's... Mason stopped, his throat tight. She's everything. Gates. They fell silent again. The fire crackled. The ocean whispered against the shore. We're going to get off this island, Scarlett said suddenly. We're going to figure out how to signal for help, and we're going to get rescued, and you're going to see Lily again. I don't care what it takes. Okay? I mean it. I didn't build a billion-dollar company by giving up when things got hard. This is just another problem to solve. Mason looked at her. The firelight caught the determination in her eyes, the stubborn set of her jaw. For the first time since the yacht exploded, he felt something other than exhaustion and fear. Hope. Just a little. But it was there. Okay, he said again. So what's the plan? The next morning they started working. Mason's plan was simple. Make the island survivable while they waited for rescue. That meant fresh water, food, shelter, and some way to signal passing ships or planes. Scarlett's plan was different. She wanted to build a raft and sail back to civilization. They argued about it for 20 minutes before Mason finally held up his hands. Look, I'm not saying it's impossible, he said. I'm saying it's suicide. We don't know where we are. We don't have navigation equipment. The currents around here are strong enough to drag us out to the middle of nowhere, and we'd die of dehydration before we found land. So we just sit here and wait? We sit here and make ourselves visible, build signal fires, spell out SOS on the beach with rocks, anything that'll catch the attention of a search plane. And if they don't come, then we deal with that when it happens. Scarlett looked like she wanted to keep arguing, but instead she turned and started gathering rocks from the beach. Fine, we'll do it your way. But if we're still here in a week, we're building that raft. Deal. They worked through the morning, hauling rocks up from the waterline and arranging them in huge letters on the sand. SOS, 20 feet tall, visible from the air if anyone happened to fly overhead. Scarlett's hands started bleeding after the first hour. She didn't complain, just wrapped them in strips torn from her ruined shirt and kept working. Mason watched her out of the corner of his eye, surprised. The cold billionaire from the yacht was gone. This version of Scarlett was focused, determined, working through pain without a word. By noon, they'd finished the SOS and moved on to building a shelter. Mason had never actually built one before, but he'd watched enough survival shows to have a rough idea. Palm fronds for the roof, driftwood for the frame, vines to lash it all together. It took them 4 hours to build something that barely qualified as a lean-to. The roof sagged in the middle and leaked when Mason poured water over it to test, but it was better than sleeping directly on the sand. "This is terrible," Scarlett said, staring at their creation. "Yeah, but it's something." That night, they shared the shelter. Mason took one end, Scarlett the other, both of them lying on beds of palm fronds that were only slightly more comfortable than bare sand. The fire burned a few feet away, close enough for warmth, but far enough that the smoke didn't choke them. "Mason," Scarlett's voice came out of the darkness. "Yeah? Thank you for pulling me out of the water, for keeping me alive, for all of this." "You're welcome. I'm not usually good at needing help." I noticed. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "My father used to say that needing people was weakness, that the only person you could trust was yourself. I built my whole life around that idea." "Your father sounds like an asshole." "Asoko." Scarlett laughed, that same surprise sound from the night before. "He was. Brilliant businessman, terrible human being, died when I was 23 and left me a failing tech company and 17 million in debt. Everyone said I should sell it, take whatever I could get, and walk away. But you didn't, Shasam." "No, I fired half the staff, restructured everything, worked 90-hour weeks for 3 years straight, nearly had a nervous breakdown twice. But I turned it around. 5 years later, we were worth $500 million. 10 years later, $3 billion. And the whole time, I never let myself depend on anyone. Never let myself be vulnerable." "How'd that work out?" "I'm lying in a palm frond shelter on a deserted island, so you tell me." Mason smiled in the darkness. "Maybe your father was wrong. Maybe." They fell asleep to the sound of waves and crackling fire, and for the first time since the yacht exploded, Mason didn't have nightmares about drowning. The next 3 days followed the same pattern. Wake up, tend the fire, check the beach for debris that might have washed up from the yacht. Gather food and water, improve the shelter. Scan the horizon for rescue boats. Nothing came. Scarlett grew quieter as the days passed. She still worked hard, hauling water, gathering coconuts, helping Mason reinforce the shelter. But the determined energy from that first day was fading, replaced by something heavier. Resignation, maybe? Or grief. On the 4th day, Mason found her sitting at the water's edge, staring out at nothing. "You okay?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "They're not coming." "You don't know that." "It's been 4 days, Mason. The search teams would have found us by now if they were going to find us." "Maybe they're searching the wrong area. Maybe the currents carried us farther than they thought. Or maybe they've already given up." She picked up a shell, threw it into the water. "My board's probably meeting right now, deciding what to do with the company now that I'm dead. Marcus's family is planning his funeral. And Lily—" "Don't," Mason said sharply. "Don't go there. She thinks you're dead." "I know. She's 7 years old and she's already lost her mother, and now she thinks she's lost you too." "I said don't!" Mason stood up, his hands clenched into fists. "You think I'm not thinking about that every second of every day? You think I don't lie awake at night imagining her face when Mrs. Chen told her I wasn't coming home? But sitting here drowning in it doesn't help. We survive. That's what we do. We stay alive and we get off this island and I see my daughter again. End of story." Scarlett looked up at him, her eyes red. "And if we don't?" "Easy." Mom." "Then we don't. But I'm not giving up until I'm dead, and neither are you." He walked away before she could respond, heading into the jungle to check the fish trap he'd built in the stream. It was empty. Again. He'd caught exactly 1 fish in 4 days, and it had been so small they'd barely gotten a meal out of it. The banana trees were still useless, fruit too green. The taro roots might be edible in another week. Until then, it was coconuts and whatever else they could scavenge. Mason was heading back to the beach when he heard it. Faint at first, then louder. A mechanical sound growing stronger. A helicopter. He ran. Scarlett was already on the beach, waving her arms, screaming at the sky. Mason spotted the helicopter maybe half a mile out, flying low over the water, Coast Guard markings on the side. "Here!" Mason shouted, running toward the signal fire they'd built specifically for this moment. "We're here!" He grabbed a burning stick from the cooking fire and threw it onto the signal pile. Dry wood and green palm fronds. It would make smoke, thick black smoke that should be visible for miles. The signal fire caught immediately, sending a column of smoke spiraling into the sky. The helicopter kept flying. "No," Scarlett breathed. "No, no, no." She ran to the SOS spelled out in rocks, waving her white shirt over her head, screaming herself hoarse. Mason joined her, both of them jumping and shouting and begging the universe to make the pilots look down. The helicopter flew past the island without slowing. They watched it disappear over the horizon, the sound of its rotors fading until there was nothing left but ocean and wind. Scarlett dropped to her knees in the sand. Mason stood frozen, his mind refusing to process what had just happened. They'd done everything right. The signal fire, the SOS. They'd been visible. They'd been right there, and the helicopter had flown right past. "They didn't see us," Scarlett said, her voice hollow. "They were looking, and they didn't see us." Mason walked to the dying signal fire and stared at the smoke. It was black, thick, exactly what it was supposed to be. But the island was small. From the air, maybe it just looked like part of the ocean. Maybe the rocks spelling SOS blended into the beach. Maybe the pilots had been looking the wrong direction. Maybe they'd never had a chance at all. He turned to find Scarlett still on her knees, tears running down her face. Not the controlled, dignified crying of someone trying to maintain composure. Broken, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Mason went to her, knelt down, and pulled her into his arms. She fought him at first, pushing against his chest, but he held on until she stopped struggling and collapsed against him. Her fingers dug into his shirt, and she cried like the world was ending. Maybe it was. "I can't do this," she choked out. "I can't. I'm not strong enough." "Yes, you are. You don't know that." "Yeah, I do. You're Scarlet Veil. You turned $17 million in debt into $3 billion. You rebuilt your father's company from nothing. You survived a yacht exploding and drowning in the middle of the ocean. You're the strongest person I've ever met." "I'm not. I'm scared. I'm so scared and I don't know what to do and I can't." "Then be scared. Be terrified. But don't quit." He pulled back enough to look at her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "We're going to survive this. Both of us. I don't care how long it takes or how hard it gets. We're getting off this island and we're going home. You can't promise that. Watch me." Something shifted in her expression. The despair didn't disappear, but it changed, hardened into something else. Determination, maybe. Or just stubbornness. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." They sat there on the beach as the signal fire burned itself out, holding on to each other like it was the only thing keeping them both from falling apart. And maybe it was. That night, everything changed. They were eating dinner, coconut and some kind of root vegetable Mason had found that might have been edible, when Scarlett suddenly went pale. "I'm going to be sick," she said, lurching to her feet. She barely made it to the edge of the jungle before she threw up everything in her stomach. Mason followed, holding her hair back while she retched into the bushes. "The root," Mason said. "Damn it, I thought it was safe." But Scarlett shook her head, wiping her mouth. "It's not the food." "Then what?" "I'm late." Mason stared at her. "Late for what?" "My period. I'm late. 3 weeks late." She looked at him, her eyes wide with something between terror and disbelief. "Mason, I think I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Mason's brain stuttered, trying to process. Pregnant. On a deserted island with no doctors, no medicine, no way to... "Are you sure?" he managed. "No, but I'm never late. Ever. And the nausea, the exhaustion. I thought it was just from the crash, but..." She pressed a hand to her stomach, her face going even paler. "Oh no. No, no, no. This can't be happening. Who's..." Mason stopped, the question dying in his throat. Stupid question. He'd seen her with Marcus on the yacht, the way they'd argued, the familiarity between them. "Marcus," Scarlett confirmed, her voice breaking. "We were..." "It was complicated, a mistake. We ended it months ago, but there was one night right before the trip. She covered her face with her hands. I can't be pregnant. Not here, not now, I can't. She started hyperventilating, her breath coming in short gasps. Mason grabbed her shoulders. Hey, look at me. Breathe, just breathe. I can't do this. I can't have a baby on a deserted island with no medical care. What if something goes wrong? What if I die? What if the baby... You're not going to die. You can't know that. You're right, I can't. But panicking doesn't help. He gentled his grip, trying to sound calmer than he felt. First, we don't even know for sure if you're pregnant. Could be stress, trauma. Your body's been through hell. I know my own body. Okay, then we deal with it, one step at a time. How? Scarlett pulled away from him, pacing in tight circles. How do we deal with this? We don't have prenatal vitamins. We don't have a way to check if the baby's healthy. We don't have anything. Mason thought about Caroline, about Lily's birth in a sterile hospital with doctors and nurses and every possible safety measure, about all the things that could go wrong even in the best circumstances. Then he thought about women throughout history who'd given birth in worse conditions than this, in wars, in famines, in places with no electricity or running water. Most of them had survived. Most of their babies had survived. Most, not all. We'll figure it out, he said, even though he had no idea how. We figured out everything else so far. You tried, Sisi. Botois. Scarlett laughed high and broken. Everything else? Mason, we're starving on a handful of coconuts a day. We're sleeping in a shelter that barely keeps the rain out. We just watched our only chance at rescue fly away. And now I'm pregnant with a dead man's baby on an island we might never leave. How exactly are we supposed to figure this out? Mason didn't have an answer. Scarlett sank down onto the sand, her arms wrapped around herself. I spent my whole life in control. Every decision calculated, every risk managed. And now, her voice cracked, now I've lost everything. My company, my life, and I'm bringing a baby into this nightmare. Mason sat down beside her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, Mason said, My wife was scared too when she got diagnosed. The doctors gave her 8 months, maybe a year. She was terrified of leaving Lily behind, terrified of missing everything, first day of school, learning to ride a bike, graduation, wedding, all of it. She cried every night for 2 weeks straight. What did you tell her, Shep? That I'd remember for both of us, that I'd tell Lily all her stories, that Caroline wouldn't really be gone as long as I kept her alive in Lily's memory. He picked up a handful of sand, let it fall through his fingers. I don't know if it helped, but she stopped crying, started focusing on the time she had left instead of the time she didn't have. Scarlett was quiet for a moment. Do you think about her, Caroline? Every day. Do you still love her? The question caught Mason off guard. He'd spent 3 years very carefully not thinking too hard about the answer. I don't know, he said finally. I loved the woman she was, the life we had. But that's all gone now. Sometimes I can barely remember what her voice sounded like. Other times it's so clear it hurts. He looked at Scarlett. Grief's weird like that. It doesn't follow rules. I never wanted kids, Scarlett said softly. Never saw the point. My whole life was building the company, proving everyone wrong, winning. There wasn't room for anything else. And now? Now I don't have a choice. She pressed both hands to her stomach, her expression unreadable. There's a person growing inside me, a person I never planned for, never wanted, who might die before they're even born because I'm stuck on this island. Or who might survive, who might grow up healthy and strong, and then what? We raise a child here on this island, no school, no friends, no future. We'll get rescued eventually. Will we? Scarlett met his eyes. Tell me the truth. Do you really believe that? Mason wanted to lie, wanted to tell her that of course they'd be rescued, that help was coming, that everything would be fine, but she deserved better than false hope. I don't know, he said, but I know we're not dead yet, and as long as we're alive, there's a chance. Scarlett nodded slowly. Then she stood up, walked to the shelter, and lay down without another word. Mason stayed by the fire, watching the flames, trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. A baby. On a deserted island. with no medical supplies and barely enough food to keep 2 people alive, let alone 3. He should be terrified. And he was. But underneath the terror was something else, something he hadn't felt in 3 years: purpose. Caroline had made him promise, in those final days before the morphine took her words away, that he'd keep living, that he wouldn't let grief turn him into a ghost. He'd tried. For Lily's sake, he'd tried, but it hadn't worked. He'd been going through the motions, repairing boats and paying bills and tucking Lily in at night, all while feeling like half of him had died in that hospital bed. Now, suddenly, he had a reason to fight that wasn't just survival. Mason looked over at the shelter where Scarlett lay sleeping. Her hand was still pressed to her stomach, protective even in unconsciousness. He'd failed to save Caroline, but maybe, he could save Scarlett and her baby. Maybe that could be enough. The morning sickness started 2 days later and didn't stop. Scarlett spent the first hour after sunrise bent over the bushes at the jungle's edge, retching until there was nothing left to bring up. Mason held her hair back and tried to remember everything Caroline's doctor had said about pregnancy. Stay hydrated, rest when possible, avoid stress. Right, avoid stress while stranded on a deserted island. Simple. I hate this, Scarlett gasped between heaves. I hate everything about this. I know. No, you don't. You've never been pregnant. My wife was. I watched. Scarlett wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, her face gray. Watching isn't the same as living it. She had a point. When the nausea finally passed, Mason helped her back to the shelter. She collapsed onto the palm fronds, exhausted despite having been awake less than an hour. You need to eat something, Mason said. Can't. I'll just throw it up. You have to try. The baby needs... Don't talk to me about what the baby needs. Her voice came out sharp, cutting. Just don't. Mason backed off. He'd learned over the past week that Scarlett's mood shifted like weather patterns now. One moment she'd be focused and determined, working alongside him to improve the shelter or gather food. The next she'd be withdrawn and silent, staring at nothing with that hollow expression that meant she was somewhere else entirely. He didn't blame her. Finding out you're pregnant under normal circumstances was hard enough. Finding out while stranded with no way home, carrying a dead man's child, that was something else entirely. Mason spent the morning checking the fish traps again. Empty. He'd tried every configuration he could think of, but the fish in the stream seemed too small or too smart to get caught. The ocean might have better options, but building a trap that could withstand the waves was beyond his current skill set. He was heading back when he spotted something unusual near the rocky outcropping on the north side of the island. A piece of metal, half buried in sand, glinting in the sunlight. Mason dug it out. Part of a supply cabinet from the yacht, twisted and salt-corroded but intact. He pried it open with a rock. Inside, 3 bottles of water, still sealed. A first aid kit. An emergency flare gun with 2 flares. And a waterproof pouch containing protein bars that were technically 5 months past their expiration date but looked edible. Mason stared at his haul like he'd discovered buried treasure, which, essentially, he had. He carried everything back to camp, moving quickly. Scarlett was sitting up when he arrived, looking slightly less green. Look what washed up, Mason said, setting down the cabinet. Scarlett's eyes widened when she saw the contents. She reached for the first aid kit with shaking hands, opening it to reveal bandages, antiseptic, pain medication, and prenatal vitamins. She breathed, holding up a small bottle. There are prenatal vitamins in here. Seriously? Someone on that yacht was pregnant, or planning to be. She read the label, then looked at Mason with something like hope in her eyes. These are good ones too. Folic acid, iron, everything. That's really good, right? It's better than good. It means the baby has a chance. She set the bottle down carefully, then picked up one of the protein bars. Is it safe to eat these? Expiration dates are mostly suggestions anyway. Go ahead, us. She tore open the wrapper and took a small bite, chewing slowly like she was testing whether her stomach would accept it. When nothing came back up, she took another bite. This tastes like cardboard, she said. Yeah, but it's cardboard with calories. They rationed everything carefully. The bottled water was for Scarlett only. She needed clean water more than Mason did. The protein bars got divided into quarters, 1 piece per day to supplement the coconuts. The prenatal vitamins went into Scarlett's daily routine immediately. The flare gun, though, that was their real treasure. We save these for when we see a ship or plane, Mason said, holding up the flares. No practice shots, no accidents. These are our ticket home. Scarlett nodded. We should keep them somewhere safe, dry. They stored the flare gun in the supply cabinet, which they secured in the driest corner of their shelter. Then Mason went back to the rocky outcropping to search for more debris. He found a torn life jacket, useless. A shattered laptop that had clearly spent too long in salt water. A shoe that didn't match anything. But no more supplies. No more miracles. Still, what they'd found was enough to shift something in the camp's atmosphere. Scarlett had more energy over the next few days. The prenatal vitamins helped with the nausea, or maybe she was just getting past the worst of the morning sickness. Either way, she started eating more regularly and keeping it down. She also started asking questions. Tell me about being a father, she said one evening while they worked on expanding the shelter. What's it like? Mason hammered a support post into the sand, thinking. Terrifying, mostly. You're responsible for this tiny person who depends on you for everything, and you have no idea what you're doing. I must have called Caroline's mother 6 times the first week Lily was home, because I couldn't figure out why she was crying. What was the problem? Gas. Every single time, it was just gas. He laughed at the memory. I was convinced something was seriously wrong. Turns out babies just cry sometimes, and you have to deal with it. Scarlett tied off another vine, securing a palm frond to the frame. She'd gotten better at this over the past weeks, her hands moving with more confidence. Did it get easier? In some ways, you figure out the basics, feeding, changing, getting them to sleep. But then new problems show up, teething, tantrums. The first day of school, when they cry and you have to leave them anyway. He paused. And then bigger stuff. When Caroline got sick, Lily was too young to understand what was happening. She just knew Mommy was in the hospital a lot. That Mommy was sad. I didn't know how to explain it to her. What did you say? The truth, eventually. That Mommy was very sick and the doctors were trying to help, but they might not be able to fix it. Lily asked if she was going to die. I said, yes. Mason's throat tightened. She was 4 years old and I had to tell her, yes, your mother is dying and there's nothing anyone can do about it. Scarlett stopped working. That must have been the hardest thing you've ever done. Date. Second hardest. The hardest was watching Caroline actually die. Sitting there holding her hand while she stopped breathing. Then going home and tucking Lily in like everything was normal when nothing would ever be normal again. They worked in silence for a while. The shelter was taking shape, still crude, but better than their first attempt. Higher roof to catch less rain. Stronger frame that didn't shake in the wind. Separate sleeping areas that gave them each a little privacy. I don't know if I can do it, Scarlett said quietly. Be a mother. I don't know how. Nobody knows how. You just figure it out as you go. That's not reassuring. It's not supposed to be. Parenthood isn't reassuring. It's scary and hard, and you're going to mess up constantly. He looked at her across the shelter frame. But it's also the best thing you'll ever do. When Lily was born and they put her in my arms for the first time, I'd never felt anything like that. Like my whole life had been leading to that exact moment. Scarlett touched her stomach, that protective gesture she'd started making without seeming to realize it. What if I'm not good at it? What if I'm like my father, cold and distant and... You're not your father. How do you know? Because you're sitting here worried about it. Your father wouldn't have cared. She thought about that for a moment, then went back to tying vines. But Mason caught the small smile that crossed her face before she turned away. The next morning brought a tropical storm that lasted 3 days. They huddled in the shelter while rain hammered down in sheets, the wind threatening to tear apart everything they'd built. Water leaked through the roof in a dozen places. The fire went out despite Mason's attempts to protect it, leaving them cold and wet and miserable. Scarlett's morning sickness came back with a vengeance, made worse by the confined space and constant motion of the storm. She threw up everything she ate, then dry-heaved when there was nothing left. Mason held her and tried to keep her warm and felt completely helpless. On the second day, she developed a fever. It's fine, Scarlett insisted, shivering despite the tropical heat. Just a cold. It'll pass. You're burning up. I said I'm fine. Oh. But she wasn't fine. By that evening, she was delirious, mumbling about board meetings and acquisition contracts and someone named Jennifer, who'd apparently betrayed her. Mason dug through the first aid kit for anything that might help. The aspirin was expired, but probably still effective. He gave her 2 tablets with precious bottled water and prayed it would be enough. It wasn't. Scarlett's fever spiked through the night. She thrashed in her sleep, calling out for Marcus, for her mother, for people Mason didn't know. He stayed beside her, changing the wet cloth on her forehead every few minutes, trying to bring the fever down. "Please don't die," he whispered at one point, so quietly he wasn't sure she could hear. "I can't. I already lost Caroline. I can't lose you too." Scarlett's eyes opened, glassy and unfocused. "Mason? I'm here? Am I dying?" "No, you've got a fever. It's going to break. You don't know that." Her hand found his, gripping weakly. "If I die, the baby, you're not dying. If I do—" She coughed, the sound rattling in her chest. "Don't let them bury me in the jungle. I want ocean. Put me in the ocean. Scarlett, promise me." Mason squeezed her hand. "I promise. But it's not going to come to that." The fever broke just before dawn on the 3rd day. Mason woke to find Scarlett sitting up, weak and pale but lucid. The rain had finally stopped. Pale sunlight filtered through holes in the shelter's roof. "You're okay," Mason said, the relief so intense it made him dizzy. "I feel like I got hit by a truck." Scarlett's voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "How long was I out?" "About 18 hours. Did I say anything weird?" "Nothing I'm going to repeat, but—" She almost smiled. Then her hand went to her stomach, her expression shifting to panic. "The baby. Still there. You're still pregnant. How do you know?" "Because you're still having morning sickness. Threw up twice during the fever." Scarlett sagged with relief. "I need water." Mason helped her drink, supporting her head while she took small sips from one of the precious bottled waters. When she was done, she lay back down, exhausted from the minimal effort. "You stayed with me," she said. "The whole time. Where else would I go?" "You could have slept, rested. You look terrible. Thanks. I'm serious. When's the last time you slept for more than an hour?" Mason honestly couldn't remember. "I'm fine." "You're not. You're running yourself into the ground taking care of me." She met his eyes. "Why?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean, why? Why do you care so much? We barely knew each other before the yacht. I was just another rich person hiring you for a job. Now you're—" She gestured vaguely. "You're doing all this, building shelter, finding food, sitting up with me all night when I'm sick. Why?" Mason was quiet for a long moment. He didn't have a good answer, or maybe he did, but he wasn't ready to examine it too closely. "You're not just another rich person," he said, finally. "Not anymore. Then what am I?" Oh, he looked at her, really looked at her. Not the billionaire CEO in designer clothes, not the cold, controlled woman from the yacht. This Scarlett, the one with tangled hair and sunburned skin, wearing a torn shirt and rationed protein bars, carrying a baby she'd never planned for, with courage she didn't think she had. "You're my friend," Mason said, "and friends don't let friends die of fever on deserted islands." Something shifted in Scarlett's expression, softened. "I've never had many friends. People in my world, they want something from you. Connections, money, access. Nobody just wants to be around you for you." "That sounds lonely." "It was. Is." She looked away. "I told myself I didn't need friends, that I was better off alone, stronger that way. And now? Now I'm stuck on an island with you, and I can't imagine doing this alone. So maybe I was wrong, say." The sun came out fully, burning off the last of the storm clouds. Mason crawled out of the shelter to assess the damage. The signal fire had been completely washed away. The SOS rocks had scattered across the beach. Most of their food stores were soaked or gone entirely. They'd have to start over, again. But they were both alive. For now, that was enough. Over the next week, they rebuilt. The shelter got reinforced with lessons learned from the storm. Mason constructed a better drainage system to keep water from pooling underneath them. They moved their supplies to higher ground and built a second, smaller shelter specifically for storage. Scarlett's energy gradually returned. The morning sickness settled into a predictable pattern. Bad in the mornings, better by afternoon. She started showing around week 8, just a small bump that she kept touching like she couldn't quite believe it was real. "It's weird," she said one day while they worked on improving the fish trap. "Knowing there's a person in there, growing." "Lily used to kick," Mason said. "Caroline would grab my hand and put it on her stomach so I could feel it, like little bubbles popping." "When does that start?" "Around 4 months, usually." Scarlett did the math in her head. "That's another 2 months. Assuming we're still here. We might not be. Someone could find us tomorrow." "You don't believe that?" "No," Mason admitted, "but I'm trying to stay optimistic." They finished the improved fish trap and set it in the stream. This version was bigger, with a better funnel design that Mason had seen in a documentary years ago. Maybe this time it would actually work. Walking back to camp, Scarlett said, "I need to tell you something." The tone of her voice made Mason stop. "Okay. The yacht explosion. I don't think it was an accident." Mason had suspected as much, but hearing her say it out loud still sent a chill down his spine. "You're sure?" "Not completely. But there are too many coincidences. The storm that supposedly came out of nowhere. The engine failure right before the explosion. The fact that I just discovered my business partner was laundering money through the company." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Marcus was going to help me expose it. We were going to present evidence to the board, file reports with the SEC, everything. Then the yacht exploded and he's dead and I'm here." "Who knew about the evidence?" "Iba, just Marcus and me. We were keeping it quiet until we had everything documented." She paused. "But someone must have found out, someone who had access to the yacht. Who could plant explosives or sabotage the engines without anyone noticing? Your head of security? Maybe. Or someone on the crew? Or—" She stopped, her face going pale. "Oh no." "What?" "The hydraulic steering, the system you fixed." She grabbed Mason's arm. "What if someone sabotaged it on purpose? What if the whole reason they hired you was to get someone on board who could confirm it was actually broken? So when the yacht went down, it would look like mechanical failure instead of—" "Whoa, slow down." Mason's mind was racing, but he tried to stay calm. "You're saying someone broke the steering specifically so I'd be there to fix it?" It makes sense. They knew the yacht couldn't leave port with broken steering. They needed a mechanic to certify it was fixed so the trip would happen on schedule. Then the explosion happens and you're just collateral damage. Mason thought about the engine room, the way the explosion had started so suddenly, so completely. He'd assumed it was a fuel leak or an electrical problem. But what if it had been deliberate? "If you're right," he said slowly, "then they think we're dead. Both of us. Which means the conspiracy, whatever it is still happening. Someone's taking over my company, covering up the money laundering, getting away with murder. And there's nothing we can do about it stuck on this island." Scarlett's jaw tightened. "We have to get off. We have to find a way to get back and expose them. How? We've got 2 flares and no idea when the next ship might pass close enough to see them. Then we make ourselves more visible, bigger signals, more smoke, something they can't miss." Mason wanted to tell her it was pointless, that they'd already tried everything, that the chances of rescue were shrinking every day, and maybe it was time to accept that this island was their home now. But he looked at the determination in her eyes and couldn't bring himself to say it. "Okay," he said instead. "We'll try." They spent the next 3 days building the biggest signal fire the island had ever seen. A pyramid of driftwood 30 feet wide at the base, stuffed with dry palm fronds and arranged to maximize smoke production. They positioned it on the highest point of the island where it would be visible from the greatest distance. Mason also started working on a new project in the evenings, a cradle, carved from driftwood with his knife, rough and imperfect, but functional. He didn't tell Scarlett what he was making, wasn't sure she'd want to see it, but he kept working on it anyway, shaping the wood while the fire crackled and the ocean whispered against the shore. Scarlett caught him at it one evening. "What's that?" she asked, peering over his shoulder. "Nothing, just keeping my hands busy." She looked closer, recognition dawning on her face. "That's a cradle." "Yeah, for the baby." Seemed like a good idea. Safer than sleeping on the ground once they're born. Scarlett sat down beside him, watching his hands work the wood. You really think we're going to be here that long, when the baby comes? I don't know, but if we are, we should be ready. She was quiet for a moment. Then, can I help? Opposites. They worked together, Scarlett sanding the rough edges while Mason shaped the larger pieces. It was peaceful, almost meditative, the kind of simple task that let your mind wander without getting lost in dark thoughts. I've been thinking about names, Scarlett said suddenly. Mason looked up. Yeah? If it's a girl, I don't know. Something strong. Caroline, maybe, after your wife. Mason's throat went tight. You don't have to. I want to. She sounds like she was an amazing person. And you talk about her like. Scarlett paused, searching for words. Like she was the best thing that ever happened to you. Any child would be lucky to carry that name. What about a boy? Scarlett set down the sandpaper, touching her stomach again. Noah. I want to name him Noah. That's a good name. My grandfather's name. He was the only person in my family who ever gave a damn about me. Taught me how to play chess, took me to museums, told me I could be anything I wanted even when my father said I was wasting my time. She smiled sadly. He died when I was 12. Heart attack. I never got to tell him he was right. I bet he knew anyway. Maybe. They went back to work on the cradle. The wood took shape slowly, each piece fitting together a little better than Mason had expected. Maybe it wouldn't be perfect, but it would be good enough. And on this island, good enough was a victory. 3 weeks after finding the supply cabinet, the fish trap finally worked. Mason checked it one morning to find 6 fish thrashing inside, each one bigger than his hand. Real protein, real nutrition, the kind of food Scarlett and the baby desperately needed. He brought them back to camp triumphantly. Scarlett looked at the fish with something close to reverence. How did you? Persistence and luck. Mason started gutting them with his knife. We'll smoke most of these. Make them last longer. They built a smoking rack from green wood and hung the fish over low flames. The smell was incredible, salt and smoke, and the promise of a real meal. Scarlett sat close to the fire, watching the fish cure, and for the first time since the yacht exploded, she looked almost content. Thank you, she said. For what? All of this. Taking care of me, taking care of... She gestured at her stomach. I know I've been difficult. The mood swings, the sickness, the constant fear. You didn't sign up for any of this. Neither did you. No, but you could have, I don't know, given up on me, focused on your own survival. Instead, you're building cradles and catching fish and making sure I take my vitamins every day. She met his eyes. I don't know how to repay that. You don't have to repay anything. We're in this together. Are we? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with something Mason couldn't quite name. Yeah, he said finally. We are. That night, they ate smoked fish and coconut while the fire burned low. Scarlett fell asleep first, curled on her side with one hand on her stomach. Mason stayed up, adding wood to the fire, thinking about what she'd said. We're in this together. When had that happened? When had Scarlett stopped being the billionaire he'd rescued and become what? A partner? A friend? Something more? Mason pushed the thought away. Dangerous territory. Scarlett was pregnant with another man's child, grieving her lost life, barely surviving the same nightmare he was living. The last thing either of them needed was complicated feelings making everything worse. But as he watched her sleep, the firelight dancing across her face, he couldn't help thinking that maybe complicated feelings were already there, had been there for a while. He'd just been too stubborn or too scared to acknowledge them. The sound of a boat engine woke them both. Mason was on his feet before he'd fully processed what he was hearing, running toward the beach. Scarlett followed, moving slower, one hand braced against her lower back. There, on the horizon, a fishing boat, small but definitely real, maybe 2 miles out. The flare gun, Mason shouted. Get the flare gun! Scarlett ran back to the shelter. Actually ran, faster than Mason had seen her move in weeks. She returned 30 seconds later with the flare gun and both remaining flares. Mason loaded the first one, aimed at the sky, and fired. The flare arced up in a brilliant red streak, exploding at the apex in a shower of crimson light that lit up the morning sky. Beautiful. Impossible to miss. The fishing boat kept going. No, Scarlett breathed. No, they have to see it. Mason loaded the second flare. Their last one. He waited, tracking the boat's movement, trying to time it perfectly. The boat started to turn away. Mason fired. The second flare went up, higher than the first, bursting even brighter. For a terrible moment, the boat kept turning. Then, it stopped, changed direction, started heading toward the island. Scarlett grabbed Mason's arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. They saw us! Oh my God, they saw us! Mason couldn't speak, could barely breathe. After 2 months of nothing, 2 months of building fires and spelling SOS in rocks and watching helicopters fly past, someone had finally seen them. They were going to be rescued. The boat took 20 minutes to reach the island, 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. Mason and Scarlett stood on the beach waving, making sure they stayed visible. When the boat finally pulled close enough to drop anchor, a weathered man in his 60s leaned over the side. You folks from that yacht that went down? He called in accented English. The Azure Dream? Yes, Faso, Mason shouted back. We're survivors. We need help. Yeah. I'll be damned. Coast Guard gave up the search 6 weeks ago. Declared everyone dead. He lowered a rope ladder. Come on, let's get you home. Mason helped Scarlett climb up first, supporting her weight as she navigated the ladder. She was crying, he realized, silent tears streaming down her face as she climbed toward safety. When they were both on deck, the fisherman introduced himself as Captain Rodriguez. He gave them water, blankets, and a satellite phone to call the authorities. Nearest hospital is 4 hours out, Rodriguez said. But I've got a radio. Can have a helicopter meet us halfway if you need medical attention. I'm pregnant, Scarlett said. I need to know if the baby's okay. Rodriguez's eyes widened, but he just nodded and went to call it in. Mason sat down heavily on the deck, the adrenaline finally draining away. They'd made it. Against all odds, despite everything, they'd survived. Scarlett sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. We're going home, she said, her voice wondering. Yeah, we're going home. But even as he said it, Mason felt something twist in his chest. Home meant Lily. Home meant his real life, the one that had been waiting for him this whole time. It also meant leaving the island, leaving the life he and Scarlett had built together, however temporary it had been, leaving whatever this thing was between them before they'd had a chance to figure out what it meant. Scarlett seemed to be thinking the same thing. She took his hand, threading her fingers through his. Thank you, she said. For everything. For keeping me alive. For, her voice broke. For making me believe we could survive. We did it together. No, you did most of it. I was just trying not to fall apart. You didn't fall apart. You're stronger than you think. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they sat like that while the boat's engine rumbled to life and the island grew smaller behind them. Mason watched it disappear, that tiny piece of land that had been their entire world for 2 months. Part of him was glad to see it go. But another part, a part he didn't want to examine too closely, felt like he was leaving something important behind, something he'd never get back. The helicopter met them 2 hours out from the island, descending from gray clouds with a roar that made Mason's chest vibrate. A paramedic lowered on a cable, checked Scarlett's vital signs, and gave a thumbs up to the crew above. Baby's heartbeat is strong, the paramedic shouted over the noise. But we need to get her to a hospital for a full exam. On something. They lifted Scarlett first. Mason watched her rise into the sky. A blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her hand pressed to her stomach. Then the cable came back down for him. The world tilted as he rose into the air. Below, Captain Rodriguez waved from his boat. The island was barely visible now, just a dark smudge on the horizon. Mason turned away and focused on the helicopter interior, the clean metal and medical equipment, and the kind of organized efficiency he'd almost forgotten existed. Inside, Scarlett sat strapped into a seat, an oxygen mask over her face. The paramedic was taking her blood pressure. She looked small under the blankets, fragile in a way she had never seemed on the island. Mason sat down across from her. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Relief. Exhaustion. Something else neither of them had words for yet. The flight to the mainland took 40 minutes. They landed on a hospital roof in a city Mason didn't recognize. Medical staff swarmed the helicopter before the rotors had fully stopped. Someone tried to separate them, Scarlett to obstetrics, Mason to general examination, but Scarlett grabbed his hand. "He stays with me," she said, her voice muffled by the oxygen mask but firm. The doctor started to protest, then saw her expression and nodded. "Fine, but you both need immediate evaluation. Tras..." They wheeled Scarlett through pristine hallways that smelled like antiseptic and floor cleaner. Mason walked beside her gurney, still holding her hand, trying to process the sensory overload. Electric lights, air conditioning, people in clean clothes moving with purpose. It felt like landing on an alien planet. The obstetrics ward was on the 4th floor. They took Scarlett into an exam room while a nurse directed Mason to a chair outside. "I'll stay right here," Mason told Scarlett before they closed the door. "Not going anywhere?" She nodded, but he could see the fear in her eyes. Fear of what the doctors might find. Fear of losing the baby she'd spent 2 months learning to want. Mason sat in the hallway and waited. A different nurse brought him water and a sandwich that tasted like the best thing he'd ever eaten, despite being just turkey and cheese on white bread. He devoured it in 4 bites and asked for another. "When's the last time you ate?" the nurse asked. "Real food? 2 months ago?" Her eyes widened. "You're one of the Azure Dream survivors? The ones who were just found?" "Yeah. There's someone looking for you. Should I—" "Mason!" He turned to see Mrs. Chen running down the hallway, moving faster than he'd ever seen her move. Behind her, holding her hand, was Lily. Mason's legs stopped working. He tried to stand and couldn't, tried to speak and couldn't. All he could do was stare at his daughter, taller than he remembered, wearing a dress he'd never seen before. Her hair cut shorter as she broke away from Mrs. Chen and ran toward him. She hit him like a small missile, wrapping her arms around his neck so tight he could barely breathe. Mason held her and felt something inside him break open. All the fear he'd been holding back, all the grief and desperation and terrible certainty that he'd never see her again, it all came flooding out at once. He was crying, couldn't stop crying, didn't want to stop. "Daddy!" Lily sobbed into his shoulder. "Daddy, you're alive. They said you were dead, but I knew you weren't. I knew you'd come back." "I'm sorry," Mason managed. "I'm so sorry, baby. I tried to get home sooner. I tried. You're here now." She pulled back enough to look at his face, her hands framing his cheeks. "You're really here." "Yeah, I'm really here." "Mrs." Chen reached them, tears streaming down her face. She put a hand on Mason's shoulder and squeezed hard enough to hurt. "You stubborn fool," she said. 2 months we thought you were dead. 2 months of that child crying herself to sleep every night. If you weren't already half dead, I'd kill you myself." "I know. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't cover it." But she was smiling through the tears, and when she pulled him into a hug, he could feel her shaking. They sat together in the hallway, Lily plastered to Mason's side like she was afraid he'd disappear if she let go. Mrs. Chen filled him in on everything he'd missed. The Coast Guard search that had lasted 10 days before being called off. The memorial service that half the town had attended. The reporters who'd camped outside their house for weeks looking for statements. "Lily wouldn't talk to any of them," Mrs. Chen said. "Refused to believe you were gone, kept telling everyone you'd come home." "I did come home," Mason said, holding Lily tighter. "Who's the lady?" Lily asked, looking toward the exam room door. "The one they brought in with you." "Her name is Scarlett. We were on the island together." "Is she your girlfriend?" The question caught Mason off guard. "No, we're friends. She helped me survive. Can I meet her?" "Well, maybe later. She's seeing doctors right now. She's pregnant, and they need to make sure the baby's okay." Lily's eyes went wide. "There's a baby?" "Yeah, due in about 6 months. Is it yours?" "Lily, what? I'm just asking." Mrs. Chen tried to hide a smile. "Let your father catch his breath, child. He's been through enough without you interrogating him." But Lily had already moved on to the next question. "Did you live in a cave? Did you have to eat bugs? Did you make fire with sticks?" Mason answered as best he could, editing the scarier parts, keeping his voice light even when describing things that had been anything but light at the time. Lily absorbed every word, her expression shifting between wonder and horror and pride. "You're a hero," she announced when he finished. "You saved her life. She saved mine too. We took care of each other. Still, you're a hero." The exam room door opened. A doctor emerged, looking tired but satisfied. "Mr. Reed, Miss Vale is asking for you." Mason stood, keeping Lily's hand in his. "Can she come?" "Briefly. We need to run more tests, but Ms. Vale wanted to talk to you first." They found Scarlett propped up in a hospital bed, hooked to monitors that beeped softly. She looked exhausted, but better than she had on the helicopter. Some color had returned to her face. "The baby's fine," she said as soon as she saw Mason. "Healthy heartbeat, good size for gestational age. The doctors can't believe it. They said given the circumstances, the malnutrition, the stress..." Her voice broke. "But he's fine. He's perfect. That's amazing." Mason felt his own eyes getting wet again. "I'm so glad." Scarlett's gaze shifted to Lily. "You must be Lily." Lily nodded, suddenly shy. "Hi. Your father talked about you constantly on the island. I feel like I already know you." Scarlett smiled. "He loves you very much." "I know." Lily looked at Scarlett's stomach. "Is the baby really okay?" "The doctors think so. I have to stay here for a few days for observation, but yes, he's okay." That's good. Babies are important." Scarlett's smile widened. "They are. Very important." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry, but we need to continue the examination. You can visit again tomorrow." Mason squeezed Scarlett's hand. "Get some rest. I'll come back." "Promise?" "Promise." They left Scarlett with the medical team and made their way back through the hospital. News crews had gathered in the lobby. Word had gotten out about the survivors being found. Mason saw cameras and microphones and reporters shouting questions, and he steered Lily and Mrs. Chen toward a side exit. A hospital security guard stopped them. "Mr. Reed, there are some people who want to talk to you. Federal agents. Something about the yacht explosion." Mason's stomach dropped. He'd known this was coming, but he'd hoped for more time. Time to process. Time to figure out what to say about his suspicions regarding the explosion. "Can it wait?" He asked. "I just want to take my daughter home. They said it's urgent. Won't take long. Say." Mason looked down at Lily, who was watching him with worried eyes. "It's okay," he told her. "Just some questions about what happened. Mrs. Chen will take you to get something to eat, and I'll meet you in a bit." "Okay." "Okay." But she hugged him again before leaving, holding on just a little too long. The federal agents were waiting in a conference room on the second floor. Two of them, both in dark suits, both wearing expressions that suggested they'd seen too much and believed too little. "Mr. Reed, I'm Agent Torres. This is Agent Kim. We're with the FBI. We need to ask you some questions about the Azure Dream." Mason sat down. "Okay. Can you walk us through what happened? From the beginning?" Mason told them everything: the emergency job, the storm, the explosion, washing up on the island with Scarlett, 2 months of survival, the rescue. Torres took notes while Kim watched Mason's face like she was reading a language written there. "Ms. Vale told us she believes the explosion was intentional," Kim said. "That she'd discovered financial crimes within her company and someone wanted to silence her." "Do you have any reason to believe that's true?" Mason thought about the way the explosion had felt. Too sudden. Too complete. "I've done marine repair for 15 years. I've seen engine failures, fuel leaks, electrical fires. That explosion, it didn't feel accidental. But you don't have proof." "No, sir." Torres leaned forward. "Here's what we know. Marcus Chen, Ms. Vale's business partner, was under investigation for money laundering. We'd been building a case for 8 months. He was scheduled to meet with us the week after the yacht trip. Then the yacht explodes and he dies. Very convenient for whoever else was involved." "You think someone on the yacht planted explosives?" "We think it's possible. We've recovered some debris from the explosion site. Our forensics team is analyzing it now." Torres paused. "But we need more. Witness testimony. But anyone who saw anything unusual before the explosion." Mason tried to remember. The crew had been professional. The passengers mostly kept to themselves. He'd been in the engine room when it happened, focused on the storm. He hadn't seen anything suspicious. There was a supply cabinet, Mason said suddenly. We found it washed up on the island. It had first aid supplies, protein bars, prenatal vitamins. Someone on that yacht was pregnant or planning to be. Kim and Torres exchanged glances. That's interesting, Kim said. The crew manifest didn't list anyone pregnant. Could it have been a passenger? All the passengers have been accounted for, dead or confirmed survivors. None of them pregnant. Oh, Mason's mind raced. Then someone brought those supplies specifically for that trip. Someone who knew they'd need them. Or someone who was planning to need them, Torres said. We'll look into it. Anything else you remember? Any conversations you overheard? Arguments? Mason told them about the argument between Scarlett and Marcus he'd heard through the yacht's walls. About Marcus seeming nervous. About the way Scarlett had been insistent that the timeline didn't change. She was supposed to sign the acquisition papers on Monday, Mason said. 3 days after the yacht trip, Marcus was helping her investigate the money laundering. If someone wanted to stop the deal and silence them both, then destroying the yacht kills 2 birds with 1 stone, Kim finished. Literally. Torres closed his notebook. We'll need formal statements from both you and Ms. Vale, and we'll probably have more questions as the investigation continues. Whatever you need. One more thing. Torres pulled out a photograph, slid it across the table. Do you recognize this man? Mason looked at the photo. Polo shirt guy. The one who'd hired him. Who'd been so insistent about checking ID and making sure the steering was certified as fixed. Yeah, he was part of the yacht crew. Head of security, I think. Why? His body was never recovered. Everyone else, passengers, crew, we've accounted for all of them, except him. The implication settled over Mason like ice water. You think he survived. We think it's possible he was never on the yacht when it exploded, that he planted the device, then left before the storm hit. Jesus. We're looking for him now. If you remember anything else, anything at all, call us immediately. Torres handed Mason a business card. And Mr. Reed, be careful. If Mrs. Vale is right about this conspiracy, whoever orchestrated it has a lot to lose. They might not be happy that you both survived. Mason took the card, his hand not quite steady. Mason took. You think we're in danger? Must pay him. I think you should be cautious. Don't talk to the media about your suspicions. Don't go anywhere alone. And if you notice anything unusual, anyone following you, strange phone calls, anything, contact us right away. They let him go after that. Mason found Mrs. Chen and Lily in the hospital cafeteria, sharing a piece of chocolate cake. Lily's face lit up when she saw him. Did they ask you about the island? She asked. Mostly about the yacht. What happened before the explosion? Oh, are you in trouble? No, baby, nothing like that. Just helping them figure out what went wrong. But as they left the hospital, slipping out a back entrance to avoid the media, Mason couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was exactly what was coming. The explosion hadn't been an accident. Someone had tried to kill Scarlett and everyone on that yacht. And now that she'd survived, now that she could expose them, they'd try again. Mason's house looked exactly the same as he'd left it 2 months ago. Same chipped paint on the front door. Same weeds growing through cracks in the driveway. Same crooked mailbox that he'd been meaning to fix for 3 years. But walking inside felt like stepping into a museum of his old life. Everything was familiar and foreign at the same time. The couch where he'd watched TV with Lily. The kitchen table where they ate breakfast. The photos on the wall of Caroline, of Lily as a baby, of a family that didn't exist anymore. Mrs. Chen cleaned everything, Lily said, watching his face. She came over every week to make sure it looked nice for when you came home. That was kind of her. She cried a lot. I heard her sometimes when she thought I wasn't listening. Mason pulled Lily into a hug. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I'm sorry I left you. It's not your fault. The storm happened. The yacht exploded. You couldn't control that. No, but I could have stayed home that day. Could have turned down the job. Then you wouldn't have saved Scarlett, and her baby would have died. The simple logic of it made Mason's chest tight. You're pretty smart, you know that? I'm reading at 7th grade level now. Mrs. Chen tested me. 7th grade? Lily, that's incredible. I had a lot of time to read while you were gone. She said it matter-of-factly. But Mason heard the hurt underneath. He spent the rest of the day trying to be present. Really present, the way he hadn't been in years. They played board games, watched Lily's favorite movies, made dinner together, real food from the refrigerator, not coconuts and smoked fish. But part of his mind kept drifting back to Scarlett, alone in that hospital room, facing her company's collapse, Marcus's death, the conspiracy that had tried to kill her, and pregnant with a baby she'd have to raise alone, unless she didn't have to be alone. The thought appeared before Mason could stop it. He pushed it away, but it came back stronger. What if he helped her? Not just as a friend, but as... No. That was crazy. Scarlett was a billionaire. He was a boat mechanic. She'd go back to her world of penthouses and private jets, and he'd stay here in his falling-apart house in a town that barely registered on maps. Their lives had intersected for a few months on an island, but that didn't mean anything permanent. Did it? Daddy, you're not listening, Lily said. Mason shook himself. Sorry, baby. What did you say? I said Mrs. Chen wants to know if we're coming to her house for dinner tomorrow. She's making pot roast. Tell her yes. And tell her I owe her about 100 pot roasts for taking care of you. Tell her yes. And tell her I. Lily grinned and ran to make the call. Mason sat on the couch, staring at the photos on the wall. Caroline smiled at him from a frame beside the TV. Frozen in time, forever young, forever healthy. He wondered what she'd think of Scarlett, of the situation they were in. Caroline had always been practical, even at the end. She probably would have told him to help Scarlett however he could, that a baby needed a father, biological or not. But would she have wanted him to? Mason's phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. Hello? Mason, it's Scarlett. Her voice made his chest do something complicated. Hey, how are you feeling? Oh, tired, overwhelmed. The doctors want to keep me another 2 days for observation. She paused. The FBI was here. They asked a lot of questions. They talked to me too. They think the explosion was deliberate. I know. And they think the guy who hired you, the head of security, he might have planted the bomb. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They're assigning me protective custody. Federal agents outside my hospital room. They think whoever did this might try again. Mason's grip on the phone tightened. That's probably smart. I'm scared, Mason. I thought we were safe once we got rescued, but we're not. Someone tried to kill me. They killed Marcus. They killed 19 other people on that yacht, and they're still out there. The FBI will find them. Will they? These people, whoever they are, they had the resources to sabotage a yacht, make it look like an accident, and cover their tracks completely. What if they're too powerful to stop? Then you expose them anyway. You tell everyone what you know, make it public so they can't silence you. I can't prove anything. Marcus had the evidence and it went down with the yacht. Then you rebuild the case. You're Scarlet Veil. You've done impossible things before. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. I need to ask you something. Okay. When I get out of here, when this is over... She stopped, started again. I don't want to go back to my old life. The penthouse, the corporate headquarters, all of it. It feels wrong now. After the island, after learning to live with less, I can't go back to that person I was. So don't. But I don't know how to be anyone else. I've been Scarlet Veil CEO for so long. I don't know who I am without the company. Mason thought about the woman he'd spent 2 months with on the island. The one who'd learned to build fires and catch fish and laugh at her own failures. The one who'd been terrified of becoming a mother, but started touching her stomach like it was the most precious thing in the world. You're still you, he said. Just a different version. A better one, maybe. You really think so? Yeah, I do. Another pause, then, I should let you go. I'm sure Lily wants your attention. Scarlett, thank you. For everything. For keeping me alive. For being... Her voice caught. For being you. She hung up before he could respond. Mason stared at his phone, his mind churning. He wanted to help her, wanted to be there for her in whatever way she needed. But how could he, realistically? He had Lily to think about. A life here that he'd paused but couldn't abandon completely. And Scarlett had her own life, her own problems that were way beyond anything Mason could help with. Unless he could help. Unless there was a way. Daddy? Lily appeared in the doorway, holding her favorite stuffed rabbit. Can I sleep in your room tonight? I keep having dreams that you're gone again. Mason's heart broke a little. Of course, baby. Come here. She climbed onto the couch beside him, tucking herself under his arm. I'm glad you're home. Me too. Do you think you'll have to go away again for the investigation? I don't know. Maybe. But I promise I'll always come back. You can't promise that. You didn't come back from the yacht. The brutal honesty of it stunned him. You're right. I can't promise I'll always come back, but I can promise I'll always try. And I'll never leave you unless I absolutely have to. Okay? Lily pressed closer. What's going to happen to Scarlett and her baby? I don't know. Will she have someone to help her when the baby comes? I hope so. What if she doesn't? The question hung in the air. Mason didn't have an answer, or maybe he did, but he wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. The next morning, Mason woke to find 17 missed calls and twice that many text messages, all from numbers he didn't recognize, all from reporters wanting interviews about the Azure Dream survivors. He ignored them and made breakfast for Lily. Pancakes, her favorite. They ate together while she told him about school, about her friends, about the substitute teacher who'd let them watch movies for a whole week after Mason was declared dead because nobody could focus on math. Everyone's going to ask about the island, Lily said. When I go back to school, well, what should I tell them? Whatever you're comfortable with. It's your story too. But it's not really my story. I wasn't there, Sassis. No, but you lived through thinking I was dead. That's its own kind of story. Lily pushed a pancake around her plate. I told my friend Emma that you were definitely alive. She said I was in denial, that sometimes people don't come back. Emma was wrong. This time. But she wasn't wrong about Mom. Lily looked up at him with Caroline's eyes. People don't always come back. Mason set down his fork. No, they don't. And I'm sorry you've had to learn that lesson twice now. Say, are you going to marry Scarlett? The question came out of nowhere. Mason choked on his orange juice. What? No. Why would you? Because you look at her the way you used to look at Mom, in the old photos, before she got sick. Mason didn't know what to say to that, didn't know if it was even true. Scarlett and I are friends, that's all. But you like her. Of course I like her. Like her. Lily, it's okay if you do. Mrs. Chen says you should find someone, that Mom would want you to be happy. Mason rubbed his face. This was not a conversation he was prepared to have at 8 in the morning. I don't know what I feel about Scarlett. Everything's too complicated right now. We just survived 2 months on an island. She's pregnant with someone else's baby. There are people trying to kill her. This isn't a situation where romance is, but you care about her. Yes, I care about her. And the baby? Mason thought about Noah, about the cradle he'd carved on the island, about the way Scarlett's expression had softened whenever she talked about the baby growing inside her. Yeah, he said quietly. I care about the baby too. Lily nodded like this confirmed something. Then you should help them. After everything's settled, you should make sure they're okay. I will. I promise. Good. She went back to her pancakes, the conversation apparently over as far as she was concerned. But for Mason, it was just beginning. He visited Scarlett again that afternoon. The federal agents outside her door checked his ID before letting him through. Inside, Scarlett was sitting up in bed, laptop open, frowning at the screen. Working? Mason asked. She looked up, and her whole face changed. Relief. Happiness. Something that made Mason's chest feel too small. Trying to. My board wants a statement about where I've been. The media is going crazy with speculation, and there are about 600 emails I need to deal with. She closed the laptop. But mostly I'm just staring at the screen and panicking. About what? Everything. The company, the investigation, the baby. She touched her stomach. The doctors did an ultrasound this morning. Would you like to see? She handed him a black and white printout. Mason stared at it, trying to make sense of the shapes. Then he saw it. The small form curled in the center. Head, body, tiny limbs. That's him, Scarlett said softly. That's Noah. Mason couldn't speak. He'd seen ultrasound photos before with Lily, but this felt different somehow. More real, more immediate. He's beautiful, he managed. You can't even really see him yet. It's mostly blob. He's a beautiful blob. Tess. Scarlett laughed, that surprise sound that Mason had come to love on the island. The doctors say I'm about 14 weeks along, due in late November, assuming everything continues normally. It will. You can't know that. I can hope it. She took the ultrasound photo back, staring at it with an expression Mason couldn't quite read. I've been thinking about what comes next, after I'm released, after the investigation. I don't want to go back to running the company, not the way I was before. What do you want? I want to do something that matters, something more than just making money. She looked up at him. I want to build something for Noah, a world where he can grow up safe and happy and not defined by how much money his mother has. That's a good goal. I don't know how to do it, though. I've spent my whole life chasing success, proving myself, winning. I don't know how to just be. Mason sat down in the chair beside her bed. You learned on the island. That was survival. This is different. Is it? You're still figuring out how to live, just in a different context. Scarlett was quiet for a moment. Then, I keep thinking about something you said on the island, that we're in this together. Yeah. Are we? Still? She met his eyes. I know we're back in the real world now. You have Lily. I have my company and the investigation and everything that comes with being Scarlet Vale. Our lives are completely different, but what? But I don't want to lose you. I don't want to go back to being alone. I've been alone my whole life and I'm tired of it. Her voice broke. You and Noah, you're the only real things I have. Everything else is just noise. Mason reached out and took her hand. You're not alone. I'm not going anywhere. You say that now, but when this is over, when things go back to normal, things aren't going back to normal. They can't. We're not the same people we were before the island. He squeezed her hand. You said it yourself. You don't want your old life back. Neither do I. So maybe we build something new. Together? The word hung between them, weighted with possibility and fear and hope. Yeah, Mason said. Together. Scarlett's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared. Me too. What if I'm a terrible mother? What if I can't do this? Then you'll figure it out. Same way you figured out how to survive on the island, same way you built a billion-dollar company from nothing. You're stronger than you think. I'm not strong. I'm terrified all the time. Being terrified doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. He brushed a tear off her cheek with his thumb. And for what it's worth, I think you're going to be an amazing mother. How can you possibly know that? Because I watched you on the island. I saw how you changed, how you learned to care about something besides winning and control. You're not your father, Scarlett. You're nothing like him. More tears fell. Scarlett didn't try to stop them. Thank you, she whispered, for believing in me when I don't believe in myself. Someone's got to. They sat like that for a long time, hands linked, not talking. Outside the window, the city moved on, cars and people, and life continuing like the world hadn't just turned upside down. But in this room, time felt suspended. Like they were still on the island, still in that space where only the two of them existed. A knock on the door broke the moment. Agent Torres stepped in, looking grim. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a development. We found the head of security, the one who hired you, Mr. Reed. Mason stood. Where? Dead. Apparent suicide in a motel room about 60 miles from here. He left a note confessing to planting the explosives on the yacht. Scarlett's hand tightened on Mason's. Just him? Was he working alone? Oh, the note says yes. Says he was paid by Marcus Chen to sabotage the yacht. That Chen was trying to fake his own death to escape the money laundering charges and frame you for everything. That's insane, Scarlett said. Marcus was helping me investigate the money laundering. He wouldn't... I know. We don't believe the note either. The forensics suggest it was written under duress, probably at gunpoint. Torres pulled out his phone, showed them a photo. We found this in the room, about his hidden under the bed. The photo showed documents, financial records, transaction histories, everything Scarlett and Marcus had been compiling before the yacht trip. That's the evidence, Scarlett breathed. That's everything we needed to prove the money laundering. which means someone wanted the security chief dead before he could talk. Someone who knew he had these documents. Torres pocketed his phone. We're analyzing everything now. Should have names within 48 hours. And then what? Mason asked. Then we make arrests. Shut down the conspiracy. Make sure whoever did this faces justice. Torres looked at Scarlett. But until then, you're still in danger. We're moving you to a secure location as soon as you're medically cleared. Boy, pumps. What about Mason and Lily? We can offer them protection too if you think they're at risk. Mason thought about Lily, about bringing federal agents and danger into her life when she'd just gotten him back. No, we'll be fine. Mason, Scarlett started, we'll be careful, but Lily doesn't need this. She needs normal. She needs her father home and safe and not looking over his shoulder for assassins. Torres nodded. Understood. But if anything changes, anything at all, you call us immediately. He left them alone again. Scarlett looked at Mason with worried eyes. You should take the protection, she said. No. If something happens to you because of me, nothing's going to happen. Torres said 48 hours. We can lay low for 48 hours. And after, when they make the arrests, then it's over. You're safe. Noah's safe. And we figure out what comes next. Scarlett reached for his hand again. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise. And promise you'll come back after this is done. That you won't just disappear into your life and forget about me. Mason leaned down and kissed her forehead, the gesture feeling natural and right. I couldn't forget about you if I tried. He left the hospital as the sun was setting, his mind churning with everything Torres had said. The head of security dead. The evidence recovered. Arrests coming within 2 days. It should have felt like relief, like the nightmare was finally ending. Instead, Mason felt the hair on the back of his neck standing up. The same instinct that had kept him alive on the island, warning him when storms were coming. Something was wrong. He was halfway to his truck when he noticed the man in the dark sedan parked across the street. Just sitting there, watching. Mason changed direction, walking toward the hospital entrance instead of the parking lot. The sedan's engine started. Mason's heart rate kicked up. He pulled out his phone, dialed Torres. Someone's following me, he said when the agent answered. Dark sedan. Can't see the plates from here. Where are you? Hospital parking lot. About to go back inside. Do it. I'll have local PD there in 3 minutes. Mason ended the call and ran for the entrance. Behind him, the sedan's tires squealed as it accelerated. Mason dove through the sliding doors just as the sedan jumped the curb, crashing into the hospital's concrete barriers. The driver's door opened. A man got out. Not the security chief, someone else. He had a gun. Hospital security tackled him before he could raise it. More security poured out of the building. Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Mason stood frozen, his heart hammering, watching the man struggle against the security guards. This was real. The danger Torres had warned about wasn't theoretical anymore. Someone really was trying to kill them, and 48 hours suddenly felt like an eternity. The man in custody refused to talk, sat in the interrogation room for 6 hours straight with his arms crossed and his mouth shut, staring at the wall like it held answers nobody else could see. Agent Torres called Mason with updates every hour, his frustration bleeding through the phone line. We've got nothing, Torres said on the 4th call. No ID, no wallet, no phone. Fingerprints aren't in any database. It's like he doesn't exist. But he tried to kill me, Mason said, pacing his living room while Lily slept upstairs. That's got to mean something. It means someone's desperate. Desperate enough to send a ghost after you in broad daylight outside a hospital. Torres paused. We're moving up the timeline, making arrests tonight instead of waiting. If they're willing to risk this kind of exposure, they know we're close. Who are you arresting? Can't say yet, but it's big. Board members, executives, people with enough power to make yacht explosions look like accidents. Another pause. Stay inside, Reed. Lock your doors. We've got a patrol car on your street, but don't take chances. Mason hung up and checked the locks for the 3rd time. The patrol car sat under a streetlight 2 houses down. visible through the front window. It should have been reassuring. It wasn't. He couldn't sleep. Spent the night on the couch with the TV on mute, watching news coverage of the Azure Dream survivors. His own face stared back at him from the screen, a photo someone had pulled from the town's website. Scarlett's official headshot appeared beside it, the polished CEO version that looked nothing like the woman he knew. The chyron read, "Billionaire CEO and local mechanic, inside the island survival story." Mason turned off the TV. Morning came gray and cold. Lily found him still on the couch, staring at nothing. "Did you sleep at all, Shitas?" she asked. "A little. A lie, but a kind one. You look terrible." "Thanks, kiddo." She sat down beside him, pulling her knees to her chest. "Is someone really trying to hurt you?" Mason had tried to shield her from the details, but Lily was too smart for her own good. She'd heard him on the phone with Torres, seen the police car outside. "Some bad people did bad things," Mason said carefully. "The police are handling it. We're safe." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I've got right now." Lily rested her head on his shoulder. "I don't want to lose you again." "You won't, I promise. You can't promise that." She was right, and they both knew it. But what else could he say? That the world was dangerous and unpredictable and sometimes people died for no good reason? She'd already learned that lesson with Caroline. Mason's phone buzzed. Torres again. "We made the arrest," the agent said without preamble. 4 board members, 2 executives, and the CFO, all in custody, all facing federal charges. Mason's chest loosened slightly. "And Scarlett?" "Safe. The threat's contained." Torres sounded exhausted but satisfied. "You can breathe now, Reed. It's over." But it wasn't over. Not really. Because later that afternoon, when Mason finally allowed himself to drive back to the hospital, he found Scarlett surrounded by lawyers and board members and people in expensive suits who looked at Mason like he was something tracked in on someone's shoe. "Ms. Vale needs to focus on company matters right now," one of the lawyers said, physically stepping between Mason and Scarlett's door. "Perhaps you could come back another time." I'm here to see a friend, Mason said. "Not here to discuss business." "Nevertheless, let him in." Scarlett's voice cut through the hallway. She appeared in the doorway, still in a hospital gown, her face pale but determined. "These people were just leaving," she said, looking at the lawyers. "We're done for today. Ms. Vale, the acquisition can wait. Everything can wait." Her eyes found Mason's. "Come in." The lawyers left reluctantly, shooting Mason looks that ranged from curious to hostile. Mason followed Scarlett into her room and closed the door. "You okay?" he asked. "No." She sat down on the bed, looking exhausted. "They want me to step down. Temporarily, they say, while the scandal blows over. Let the interim CEO handle things until I've recovered from my ordeal." "And you said?" "Oh, I said no. This is my company. I built it from nothing. I'm not handing it over because some criminals tried to kill me." She touched her stomach. "But I also don't want to spend the next 6 months fighting board battles and doing damage control. I want to focus on Noah, on being ready to be his mother." "So what are you going to do?" Scarlett looked at him for a long moment. "I'm going to walk away. Sell my shares. Take the money and disappear." Mason sat down heavily. "Scarlett, I know, it sounds crazy, but I've been thinking about it since we got rescued. That life, the penthouses, the corporate jets, the constant pressure to win and dominate and prove myself. I don't want it anymore. It nearly got me killed. It did get Marcus killed." Her voice cracked. "I want something different for Noah, for me." "What do you want?" "I want what we had on the island. Not the starvation and fear, but the simplicity. Waking up and knowing the only thing that mattered was survival. Taking care of each other. Being..." She stopped, started again. "Being real." Mason understood. He'd felt it too. That strange peace that came from having nothing. No bills, no deadlines, no expectations. Just 2 people trying to stay alive. "So you're going to sell everything, and then what?" he asked. "I don't know yet. Buy a house somewhere quiet. Near the ocean, maybe. Somewhere Noah can grow up without photographers and reporters and people who only care about how much money his mother has. She met his eyes. Somewhere I can figure out who I am when I'm not Scarlett Vale, CEO. That's a big change. I've made bigger ones. I survived a yacht explosion and 2 months on a deserted island while pregnant. I think I can handle small-town life. Mason smiled despite himself. Small-town life isn't easy. People know your business. Nothing stays private. And the gossip, I'll take gossip over assassination attempts. Fair point. There's something else, Scarlett said quietly. Something I need to tell you. Mason waited. I've been thinking about us, about what we are to each other. She twisted the hospital blanket between her fingers. On the island, we were survival partners, then friends, then something I don't have words for. And now that we're back, I don't know what we're supposed to be. What do you want us to be? I want you in my life, in Noah's life, not as an obligation or because you feel responsible, but because you want to be there. She looked up at him, and Mason saw fear in her eyes. Real, raw fear. I know it's asking a lot. You have Lily, your own life, and I'm a mess, pregnant, homeless, about to blow up my entire career. But Mason crossed the room and kissed her. It wasn't planned, wasn't something he'd thought through or decided was a good idea. It just happened, as natural as breathing. Scarlett made a surprised sound, then kissed him back. Her hands came up to his face, holding him there like she was afraid he'd disappear. When they finally broke apart, Mason rested his forehead against hers. I want to be there, he said, for you and Noah, however you need me. Are you sure? Because once you're in, I'm not letting you go. I can't do this alone. You're not alone. You've never been alone. Not since I pulled you out of that water. Scarlett's eyes filled with tears. I love you. I know it's too soon and too complicated, and we barely know each other in the real world, but I love you, and I needed to say it. Mason's chest felt too full, like his heart had grown 3 sizes too big. I love you too. Have for a while, I think. Just didn't know how to say it. They held each other while the hospital sounds filtered through the door, beeping monitors, rolling carts, distant conversations. The real world, continuing around them. What are we going to tell Lily? Scarlett asked. The truth, that I met someone, that she makes me happy, that there's going to be a baby, and we're all going to figure this out together. She might not be okay with it. She asked me if I was going to marry you, yesterday morning, over pancakes. Scarlett pulled back to look at his face. What did you tell her? That I didn't know what we were, that everything was complicated. Mason smiled. She told me I should help you. Make sure you and Noah are okay. Said it was the right thing to do. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. Scarlett touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. I'm scared. Of messing this up, of not being enough, of... Stop. You're going to be amazing. At all of it. How can you be so sure? Because I know you. The real you, not the billionaire version. And the real you is strong and stubborn and brave enough to survive anything. The doctors released Scarlett 3 days later with strict instructions about rest and prenatal care and a list of warning signs to watch for. Mason picked her up in his truck, which looked ridiculous parked among the Mercedes and BMWs in the hospital lot. This is your truck? Scarlett asked, staring at the rusted exterior and mismatched door. Don't judge. It runs. I wasn't judging. It's just very different from what I'm used to. You're going to have to get used to different. She climbed in carefully, one hand on her stomach, and Mason drove them back to his house. The media was waiting, of course. Cameras and microphones and reporters shouting questions as they pulled into the driveway. Ignore them, Mason said. They'll get bored eventually. Inside, Lily was waiting with Mrs. Chen. She took one look at Scarlett and said, You look tired. Do you want tea? I'd love some, thank you. Mrs. Chen bustled off to the kitchen, leaving Lily and Scarlett staring at each other. So you're having a baby, Lily said. I am. And you and my dad, you're together? We are, if that's okay with you. Lily considered this. Are you going to live here? I don't know yet. We haven't figured out all the details. What? Our house is kind of small, and it needs a lot of repairs. The roof leaks, and the bathroom door doesn't close right, and Lily, Mason warned, I'm just saying, if Scarlett's going to live here, she should know what she's getting into. Scarlett smiled. I appreciate the honesty, and you're right, we'll need to figure out living arrangements. But right now, I'm just focused on getting through the next few months. Until the baby comes. Yes. Lily walked closer, studying Scarlett's face with the same intense focus she used for her homework. Dad says you're nice, that you helped him survive on the island. He helped me too. I wouldn't have made it without him. Are you going to make him sad? Like when Mom died? The question landed like a punch. Mason started to intervene, but Scarlett held up a hand. I hope not, she said quietly. But I can't promise I won't. People make each other sad sometimes, even when they love each other. What I can promise is that I'll try my best. To be good to your father, to be someone you can trust. Lily thought about this. Then, apparently satisfied, she nodded. Okay, you can stay, but you have to help with chores. Dad says everyone who lives here has to help. Deal. They settled into an awkward routine over the next few weeks. Scarlett slept in Mason's room while he took the couch, which made Mrs. Chen purse her lips in disapproval, but she didn't comment. The media attention gradually faded as other stories took over the news cycle. The FBI's investigation concluded with guilty pleas from all the arrested executives. And slowly, impossibly, they became something like a family. Scarlett learned to cook, badly at first, burning everything she touched, but getting better with practice. She helped Lily with homework, turned out to be brilliant at math. She attended Lily's school play and clapped louder than anyone when Lily forgot her lines and improvised. Mason watched her transform from the controlled CEO into someone softer. Someone who laughed at stupid jokes and cried during commercials and fell asleep on the couch with her hands on her growing belly. The company sold for just under $3 billion. Scarlett kept enough to be comfortable and donated the rest to foundations supporting single parents and missing children. The news called her a philanthropist. Mason called her amazing. By her 6th month, they'd bought a house near the coast. Not a mansion, just a comfortable 4-bedroom with a yard and a view of the ocean. Close enough to Mason's work that he could commute. Good schools for Lily. Room for Noah when he arrived. The night they moved in, after the boxes were unpacked, and Lily was asleep in her new room, Mason and Scarlett sat on the back porch watching the waves. Thank you, Scarlett said. For what? For this. All of this. For believing I could be someone other than who I was. You did the hard part. I just stood beside you. You did more than that. She took his hand, placed it on her stomach. Feel that? Mason felt it. A small bump, then another. Noah, kicking. He's strong, Mason said. Like his mother, Scarlett said with a smile. Stubborn too. He only kicks when I'm trying to sleep. Lily was the same way. Caroline used to say she was practicing for soccer. They sat in comfortable silence, Mason's hand still on Scarlett's stomach, feeling their son move beneath his palm. His son. That's how he'd started thinking of Noah. Not Marcus's baby, not just Scarlett's baby, but theirs. I want to ask you something, Scarlett said, but I'm afraid of the answer. Ask anyway. Will you adopt him? After he's born? I know it's fast and we're not married and there's no reason you should take on that responsibility. But I want Noah to have a father, a real father, not just someone who's around. And you're the best father I've ever seen. Mason's throat went tight. Yes, I'd be honored. Scarlett's face crumpled with relief. Really? Really. I love him already. Have since the moment you told me you were pregnant, even when I was terrified and sick and impossible to deal with? Especially then. She kissed him, long and slow, her hands in his hair. When they pulled apart, she was crying. I never thought I'd have this, she said. A family. People who loved me for me instead of what I could give them. I spent so long thinking I didn't need it, that I was better off alone. And now? Now I can't imagine my life without you and Lily. You saved me, Mason, not just from drowning, from myself. Mason pulled her closer, careful of her belly. You saved me too. I was going through the motions before the island. Working, raising Lily, but not really living, just existing. You reminded me what it felt like to actually be alive. They stayed on the porch until the stars came out, talking about everything and nothing. Plans for Noah's nursery, names they'd considered and rejected, whether Lily would be okay sharing attention with a baby. The future stretched out ahead of them, uncertain but full of possibility. Noah was born on a rainy November night, 3 weeks early, and screaming loud enough to wake the entire hospital wing. Mason held Scarlett's hand through 17 hours of labor, watched doctors rush in when complications developed, and felt his heart stop when Noah came out blue and silent. Then the baby cried, that raw newborn wail, and Mason breathed again. "He's perfect," Scarlett said, exhausted and crying and more beautiful than Mason had ever seen her. "He's absolutely perfect." Noah wasn't perfect. He had jaundice and needed to stay under lights. He had trouble latching and lost weight those first few days. The doctors warned about developmental delays, possible complications from the stress Scarlett had endured during pregnancy. But he was theirs. Theirs. Lily met her brother when he was 2 days old, approaching his bassinet like he might explode. "He's really small," she said. "All babies are small, Mason told her. "Was I that small?" "Smaller. You could fit in one hand." Lily reached out carefully, touching Noah's tiny fist. His fingers curled around hers reflexively, and her whole face lit up. "He's holding my hand," she whispered. "Look, Dad, he's holding my hand." Mason looked at Scarlett, who was crying again. Happy tears this time. "We should probably tell her," Scarlett said. "Tell me what?" Lily asked, not looking away from Noah. Mason knelt down beside her. "Scarlett and I are getting married, and I'm going to adopt Noah, which means he'll officially be your brother, if that's okay with you." Lily finally tore her eyes away from the baby to look at Mason. "Really? Really? Can I be in the wedding?" Scarlett laughed. "Of course you can. You can help plan the whole thing if you want." "Can I pick my own dress?" "Within reason." "And can Noah be in it too, even though he's a baby?" "We'll figure something out." Lily went back to staring at Noah, her expression serious. "Okay then. That sounds good." Just like that, it was decided. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony on the beach, the same stretch of coastline visible from their house. Lily wore a purple dress she'd picked out herself. Noah slept through most of the ceremony in Mrs. Chen's arms. Scarlett wore white, but not a traditional gown, something simple and comfortable that she could move in. Mason wore the nicest suit he owned and felt like the luckiest man alive. "I didn't write vows," Scarlett said when it was her turn to speak. "I tried, but everything I came up with sounded wrong. Too flowery, too scripted. So I'm just going to say what's true." She took Mason's hands. 2 years ago, I thought I had everything. Money, power, success. I thought I'd won at life. Then a yacht exploded and I lost it all. And in losing everything, I found you. Found this. She gestured at the ocean, the beach, Lily and Noah, and the small group of friends and family watching. "You taught me that survival isn't about being the strongest or the richest or the most successful. It's about being real. About letting people see you, really see you, even when you're scared and broken and don't have all the answers." Her voice caught. "I love you, Mason Reed. I love your daughter, who's braver than I'll ever be. I love the life we've built together, and I promise to spend every day trying to be worthy of it." Mason's own vows were simpler. "I promise to keep you safe, to stand beside you when things get hard, to love you and Noah and Lily with everything I have. That's all I've got, but it's yours." They kissed while the waves crashed behind them, and Lily cheered, and Noah woke up crying. It was messy and imperfect and exactly right. The years that followed weren't easy. Noah's developmental delays turned out to be real. He struggled with motor skills, needed speech therapy, took longer to hit milestones than other kids his age. Scarlett fought guilt over it constantly, convinced the stress she'd endured on the island had caused permanent damage. "It's not your fault," Mason told her repeatedly. "You did everything right. Sometimes things just happen." "But what if I'd No, we're not doing what ifs. Noah is who he is. And who he is pretty amazing. And he was. Stubborn like his mother, with Mason's quiet determination. He learned to walk at 2, to talk at 3. By 4, He was obsessed with boats and the ocean, insisted on hearing stories about the island where he'd been conceived. Lily turned into an incredible big sister, patient with Noah when he struggled, fierce in defending him against kids who made fun of his speech delays. She grew into a teenager who'd inherited Caroline's smile and Mason's practicality, and none of Scarlett's corporate ambition. "I want to be a marine biologist," she announced at 14. "Study ocean conservation. Make sure places like the island don't get destroyed by pollution." Scarlett funded her first research trip without being asked. Mason went back to boat repair, but on his own terms now. Opened a small marina that specialized in teaching underprivileged kids maritime skills. It didn't make much money, but it didn't need to. Scarlett's foundations covered the costs. They went back to the island once, when Noah was 5. Captain Rodriguez took them on his fishing boat, the same one that had rescued them years ago. The island looked smaller than Mason remembered, less threatening, just a piece of rock and sand and palm trees. "This is where you lived?" Noah asked, staring at the beach. "For 2 months, Scarlett said. "Your father built a shelter right there. Caught fish in that stream. Kept us both alive when I was pregnant with you." "Was it scary?" "Look, terrifying," Mason said honestly. "But also special. We learned a lot about ourselves on that island." They didn't stay long, just walked the beach, showed Noah where they'd built the signal fire, pointed out the rocky outcropping where they'd found the supply cabinet that had saved Scarlett's life. Then they got back on the boat and went home, because that's what their house was now. Home. Not a mansion or a penthouse or a temporary stopping point. A real home filled with real people who loved each other, despite all their flaws and complications. Some nights, when the kids were asleep and the house was quiet, Mason and Scarlett would sit on the back porch and watch the ocean. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, being. "Do you ever regret it?" Scarlett asked one of those nights. "Giving up your old life? It was simpler before. Just you and Lily." "Simple isn't always better," Mason said. "And no, I don't regret any of it. Even the scary parts, the assassination attempts, and the media circus, and learning to be a stepfather to a kid with special needs? Especially those parts. They made us who we are." Scarlett leaned her head on his shoulder. "I used to think strength meant never needing anyone, being completely self-sufficient. But that's not strength. That's just loneliness wearing a mask. So what's real strength? Letting people in, trusting them to catch you when you fall, admitting you can't do everything alone." She looked up at him. "You taught me that. On the island. Every day since." Mason kissed the top of her head. "We taught each other. And that was the truth of it. They'd saved each other, not just from drowning or starvation or conspiracies, but from the smaller, quieter deaths that came from living disconnected lives, from going through the motions without really feeling anything. The island had stripped away everything, money, status, control, and left them with only each other. And in having only each other, they discovered that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Years later, when Mason was gray-haired and Noah was heading off to college, when Lily had her PhD and was teaching marine biology at a university across the country, someone asked him what he'd learned from the whole experience. Mason thought about it for a long time before answering. "I learned that survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest or the richest," he said finally. "It's about being willing to change, to let go of who you thought you were and become who you need to be." Scarlett and I, we were both drowning before that yacht exploded. Drowning in different ways, but drowning all the same. The island forced us to learn how to swim. And after, when you were rescued, we kept swimming, together. Because that's what you do when you find someone worth holding on to. You don't let go just because the water gets rough. The interviewer scribbled notes, then asked one final question. "If you could go back and change what happened, prevent the explosion, avoid the island, would you?" Mason looked at Scarlett, sitting across the room with Noah, helping him pack for his first semester. Looked at the photos on the walls of their family, their life, everything they'd built from the ashes of that disaster. "No," he said, "I wouldn't change a thing, because the truth was, that island had given them more than it had taken, had shown them what really mattered when everything else burned away, had taught them that love, real love, the kind that survives storms and starvation and conspiracies, wasn't something you found in comfort and safety. It was something you built in the wreckage, together, one imperfect day at a time. And in the end, that was the only thing worth holding on to. Not money or power or success, but the people who saw you at your worst and chose to stay anyway, who held your hand through the darkness and reminded you that morning always came, eventually, if you could just hold on a little longer. Mason had held on. They both had. And they'd survived. Not just the island. Not just the explosion or the conspiracies or the media circus. They'd survived life itself. The beautiful, terrifying, impossibly complicated adventure of actually living instead of just existing. That was the real miracle. The thing no one could take away. And as Mason sat on his porch that evening, Scarlett beside him, their children's laughter drifting through the windows, the ocean whispering its eternal song, he understood that this was what happiness looked like. Not perfect, not polished, not without scars, but real, and earned, and worth every terrible moment it had taken to get here. The ocean had tried to kill them once. Instead, it had given them everything.